Hello there and welcome to Life Beyond Seen, where curiosity settles in quietly and science takes the long way around so the mind can rest while it wanders. Tonight, instead of looking up at the stars or down at the ticking clocks of the universe, we are slipping beneath the surface, far beneath it, into a world that no longer exists, yet once covered most of this planet in warm, shifting blue. A world where the largest predators in Earth's history did not walk on land or soar through the sky, but moved through water with steady, unstoppable force. When most people think of prehistoric giants, they picture towering dinosaurs crossing dusty plains, massive jaws, thunderous footsteps, teeth the size of kitchen knives. But long before whales reached their modern scale, and long before humans ever looked out across an ocean and wondered what might be swimming below, something far larger, far stranger, ruled the seas. The Mesozoic oceans were not quiet places. They were not gentle lagoons filled with harmless fish. They were vast, warm, and crowded with reptiles that had returned to the water and grown to sizes that still stretch belief. Creatures longer than buses, predators with skulls shaped like battering rams, hunters that swallowed prey whole, sometimes half their own length. And it raises a simple question, the kind that lingers when you stare at a calm shoreline and imagine what lies beneath. Why there? Why then? Why did the oceans of the Mesozoic create predators so enormous that even today, with all our modern biodiversity, nothing quite compares? Before we drift deeper, I am curious. Where are you listening from tonight? Is it late where you are, the room dim and quiet? Or is it still early, with distant traffic humming beyond the walls? And if you stepped outside right now and looked toward the nearest body of water, however small, would you ever guess that the same planet once hosted marine hunters large enough to swallow a modern great white whale? If you find this exploration calming or intriguing, if ancient oceans make your thoughts slow down just a little, I would be grateful if you liked the video and subscribed. It helps this quiet corner reach others who might enjoy drifting through deep time as well. Now, let us ease into it. Imagine Earth roughly 200 million years ago. The continents are arranged differently. Instead of the familiar separation of Africa, the Americas and Eurasia, most land is fused into a supercontinent called Pangea. The rest of the surface is dominated by a single, enormous ocean known as Panthalassa. It stretches farther than the Pacific does today, uninterrupted by the modern geography we take for granted. The climate is warmer. There are no polar ice caps. Sea levels are high, and shallow inland seas spill across continental interiors. The oceans themselves are rich with life. Ammonites spiral through open water. Shoals of fish shimmer beneath the surface. Marine invertebrates anchor themselves to reefs built not just by corals, but by organisms now long vanished. Into this world move the predators. Some of them begin on land. Reptiles that once walked with splayed legs gradually adapt to aquatic life. Limbs flatten into paddles. Tails broaden into powerful propulsion tools. Nostrils migrate along skulls to make breathing at the surface more efficient. Over millions of years, bodies reshape themselves to match the physics of water. And water changes everything. On land, gravity is relentless. If you want to grow large, your bones must thicken. Your limbs must support increasing mass. At some point, the cost of holding yourself upright becomes enormous. There is a limit to how big a land predator can become before weight itself becomes a problem. In water, buoyancy lifts much of that burden. A body submerged in seawater experiences an upward force that offsets gravity. The larger you become, the more water you displace, and the more support you receive. Instead of carrying your entire mass on limbs, you are suspended, partially weightless. That changes the equation immediately. It means that size, which is expensive on land, becomes far more affordable in the ocean. There are still constraints, of course. Muscles must move through dense fluid, oxygen must be supplied to tissues, heat must be regulated, but the simple physical support provided by water removes one of the most punishing limits on growth. A predator in the sea can grow longer without worrying that its skeleton will collapse under its own weight. That is one piece of the puzzle. Another lies in temperature. During much of the Mesozoic, global temperatures were consistently warm. Oceans were not interrupted by glacial cycles the way they are today. Warm water affects metabolism, growth rates, and the distribution of prey. In many marine reptiles, evidence suggests elevated metabolic rates compared to typical cold-blooded reptiles. Some may have maintained body temperatures higher than the surrounding water, allowing for sustained activity and long-distance hunting. Warm, oxygen-rich seas combined with high sea levels created enormous habitats. Shallow continental shelves are especially productive environments. Sunlight penetrates easily. Nutrients circulate. Plankton thrives. And where plankton thrives, food chains lengthen. If you have ever seen how life clusters around a coral reef, you have glimpsed a small version of what widespread shallow seas can support. Now expand that across entire continents. Multiply it for millions of years. Abundance feeds size. Large predators require vast amounts of energy. They cannot survive in sparse ecosystems. They need reliable prey, stable conditions, and room to move. The Mesozoic oceans provided all three. Fish diversified, squid-like cephalopods flourished. Predators grow larger. Prey species evolved to become more difficult to catch. When prey grows larger or faster, predators must respond. When predators grow larger, prey species evolve defences. Speed increases, armour thickens, senses sharpen. Over time, escalation produces extremes. Consider a marine predator that is already large. Growing slightly larger might allow it to tackle bigger prey. Bigger prey means fewer competitors can challenge it. Fewer competitors mean more stable access to food. Larger body size can also deter attack. In open water, where there are few places to hide, being massive can itself be protection. This is especially true in three-dimensional environments like oceans. On land, terrain can offer shelter, forests, burrows, mountains. In the open sea, concealment is limited. Speed and size become dominant strategies. The Mesozoic ocean also lacked certain modern constraints. There were no large baleen whales filtering plankton at enormous scales yet. No orcas coordinating in pods to take down prey cooperatively. Marine ecosystems were structured differently. Reptiles occupied niches that mammals would later inherit, but without direct competition from them at first. Early ichthyosaurs, shaped like modern dolphins but unrelated to them, appear in the fossil record not long after the end Permian extinction. They diversify rapidly. Some species grow to lengths exceeding 20 meters. Their eyes are enormous, suggesting deep or low-light hunting. Their bodies are streamlined, built for sustained speed. Then come the Plesiosaurs with long necks and broad bodies. Later, the Mosasaurs, which evolved from land-dwelling squamates and returned to the sea during the late Cretaceous. Some mosasaurs reach lengths of over 15 meters. Their skulls are heavily built. Their jaws are lined with conical teeth designed to grip struggling prey. All of this unfolds across tens of millions of years. Evolution does not hurry, but given enough time, it explores every available path. In a stable, productive marine environment, one of those paths leads toward gigantism. There is another advantage to large size in the ocean that is easy to overlook: thermal inertia. Bigger bodies retain heat more effectively. Temperature fluctuations affect small organisms quickly. Larger ones experience slower internal changes. In a world without polar ice but still subject to regional shifts, being large could buffer environmental variability. Migration also becomes more feasible. Large marine predators can travel long distances in search of food. They're not limited to small territories. The Mesozoic ocean was vast and interconnected. A giant predator could move along coastlines, across epicontinental seas, through open basins. And unlike terrestrial ecosystems, marine environments are continuous. There are no fences between continents beneath the surface. This connectivity allows populations to spread widely, increasing genetic exchange and resilience. But perhaps the most important factor is simple energy flow. Sunlight fuels plankton. Plankton feeds small organisms. Small organisms feed medium ones. At each level, energy is lost. Only a fraction moves upward. To support a top predator of enormous size, the base of the food web must be wide and stable. During large portions of the Mesozoic it was. Marine sediments from that era show extensive deposition, evidence of thriving life and constant biological turnover. Reef systems expand and contract. Cephalopods diversify into hundreds of species. Fish radiate into new forms. Predators follow. There is a temptation to think of gigantism as excess, as something dramatic and unusual. In reality, it can be a logical endpoint of sustained ecological opportunity. If food is plentiful and competition drives escalation, natural selection will not hesitate to favour larger bodies when they confer advantage. It is also worth remembering that these giants were not isolated oddities. They were part of functioning ecosystems. Juveniles grew from eggs, or live birth, depending on the lineage. Some Ichthyosaurs gave birth to live young in the water, eliminating the need to return to land. That alone removes a major limitation on size. A fully marine reproductive cycle means total commitment to the sea. Complete commitment allows specialization, and specialization, given time and stability, can produce extraordinary outcomes. If you were to stand on a shoreline during the late Jurassic and look out across a shallow sea, the surface might appear calm. Perhaps a dorsal fin would cut briefly through the water. Perhaps nothing at all. Beneath that surface, however, a predator weighing several tons could be cruising silently, scanning for movement. It would not know that hundreds of millions of years later, mammals would take its place. It would not know that its fossils would be lifted from rock layers and studied under museum lights. It would simply be doing what evolution shaped it to do: hunt, survive, grow. And as the Mesozoic continued, conditions would keep favouring those that pushed the limits of size. Warmer seas, expansive habitats, high productivity, competitive escalation. By the time the age of dinosaurs on land was in full stride, the oceans were already home to giants that rivaled anything walking the continents. Their success was not accidental. It was the result of physics, climate, geography, and evolutionary feedback loops all aligning in a way that does not often repeat. Modern oceans still produce large predators. The blue whale exceeds all of them in mass, though it is a filter feeder, not hunter. Sperm whales dive deep for squid, orcas coordinate in groups, yet the specific combination of marine reptiles dominating warm, shallow, nutrient-rich seas on a planet arranged differently has not occurred again in quite the same way. The Mesozoic Ocean was a particular moment in Earth's long story, a window when the rules of size, energy and adaptation converged to create animals that still seem almost exaggerated. As we continue, it helps to look more closely at how the stage was set before those predators ever reached their peak. Because the giants didn't appear fully formed. They emerged from a planet recovering from catastrophe, reshaping itself, filling empty ecological space with new experiments in form and function. And that wider backdrop, the world before whales, before familiar coastlines, before modern currents, is where the conditions for greatness truly began to assemble. Long before whales crossed entire ocean basins with slow, steady strokes of their tails, before dolphins learned to ride pressure waves at the bows of ships, before seals hauled themselves onto cold shorelines, the oceans belonged to a completely different cast of rulers. Mammals, at this point in Earth's history, were small, mostly nocturnal creatures keeping to the shadows of a dinosaur-dominated land. The seas were not yet their domain. They would not inherit that vast blue territory for tens of millions of years. To understand why the Mesozoic oceans created the largest predators in history, it helps to first clear away the modern image of marine life. No humpback songs echoing through deep water. No pods of orcas coordinating hunts. No elephant seals diving 2 kilometers below the surface. If you had somehow stood on a coastline 230 million years ago and peered out over the waves, you would have seen an ocean that felt familiar in shape and movement, but utterly foreign in its inhabitants. This was the Mesozoic era, spanning roughly 252 to 66 million years ago. It followed the most devastating mass extinction the planet has ever experienced, the end Permian extinction, which wiped out an estimated 90% of marine species. Entire reef systems vanished. Trilobites, which had thrived for hundreds of millions of years, disappeared forever. Ecosystems collapsed, and yet from that devastation came opportunity. When ecological space opens on such a scale, evolution does not leave it empty for long. The early Mesozoic oceans were, in a sense, rebuilding from near zero. Surviving lineages diversified rapidly. New forms appeared, old niches were reoccupied, sometimes by entirely different groups than before. The geography of the planet set the stage for this rebuilding in a way that is difficult to imagine today. Nearly all the continents were fused together into the supercontinent Pangea. It stretched from pole to pole, an enormous landmass surrounded by a single global ocean called Panthalassa. Along its margins lay the Tethys Ocean, a vast tropical seaway cutting between what would one day become Africa, Europe and Asia. This configuration mattered. Coastlines were long and continuous. Shallow continental shelves extended outward in broad bands. Shallow seas are biologically productive zones. Sunlight penetrates easily. Nutrients from land wash into coastal waters. Phytoplankton multiply. Small organisms feed on them. Energy begins to climb the ladder of the food web. High sea levels during much of the Mesozoic periodically flooded continental interiors, creating epicontinental seas. North America, for example, would later be split by the western interior seaway during the Cretaceous, forming a massive inland ocean teeming with life. These shallow seas were nurseries of productivity, supporting dense communities of fish, invertebrates, and eventually large marine reptiles. Climate conditions reinforced this productivity. The Mesozoic was generally warmer than today. There were no permanent polar ice caps for most of the era. Temperature gradients between equator and poles were less extreme. Warm water circulates differently than cold water. Ocean currents distribute heat and nutrients in patterns that can stabilize marine ecosystems over long stretches of time. Stability is crucial for the evolution of large predators. Gigantism does not arise in chaotic, collapsing systems. It requires consistent access to prey, reliable environmental conditions, and enough evolutionary time for incremental size increases to accumulate. Meanwhile, on land, dinosaurs were diversifying into dominant terrestrial herbivores and carnivores. Their presence reshaped ecosystems. Plant life changed in response to herbivory. Forests shifted composition. Rivers carried sediments and nutrients into coastal zones. Land and sea were not separate worlds. They influenced one another constantly. But in the water itself, something distinct was unfolding. Marine reptiles began to appear relatively early in the Triassic period. Some of these lineages descended from terrestrial ancestors that ventured into coastal environments, gradually adapting to aquatic life. Limbs transformed into paddles, bodies elongated, bone density changed to regulate buoyancy, tails evolved into propulsion systems. In several cases, nostrils shifted position to facilitate breathing at the surface. One of the earliest successful groups was the Ichthyosaurs. Their name means fish lizards, though they were reptiles, not fish. Over time, they developed highly streamlined bodies, with crescent-shaped tails reminiscent of modern sharks and dolphins. Convergent evolution shaped them toward hydrodynamic efficiency. The water imposes strict physical constraints. If you want to move quickly through it, your body must minimize drag. Ichthyosaurs filled roles similar to those of modern marine mammals, but millions of years earlier. Some species remained modest in size, others grew enormous. Fossils of species like Shonosaurus suggest lengths exceeding 20 meters. That is comparable to large whales, though with very different body plans. Alongside them, other marine reptile groups were experimenting with form. Nothosaurs and placodonts occupied coastal niches. Later, plesiosaurs evolved long necks and broad torsos, propelling themselves with 4 powerful flippers in a unique underwater flight motion. Their anatomy suggests a different hunting strategy than ichthyosaurs, perhaps ambush or precise pursuit. These animals did not appear in isolation. They were part of expanding marine ecosystems that also included rapidly diversifying fish, ammonites, belemnites, crustaceans, and reef-building organisms. The base of the food web strengthened as phytoplankton populations increased in warm, nutrient-rich seas. It is important to remember that the Mesozoic oceans were not empty expanses punctuated only by giant predators. They were densely populated environments with complex interactions. Schools of fish would have shimmered in mid-water. Cephalopods with coiled shells drifted and darted. Reefs hosted intricate communities. Large predators require this density. A 10-ton hunter cannot survive by chasing occasional prey. It needs abundance. The rebuilding after the End-Permian extinction eventually provided that abundance. Over millions of years, evolutionary pressures began to favour increased size in certain lineages. In open water, size confers multiple advantages. Larger individuals can travel longer distances efficiently. They can prey upon a wider range of species. They are less vulnerable to predation themselves once fully grown. Juveniles, of course, remain vulnerable, but if enough survive to maturity, natural selection can reward those that reach imposing dimensions. Another factor shaping this world before whales was the chemical composition of the oceans. Oxygen levels in the atmosphere and oceans fluctuated during the Mesozoic, but several intervals show relatively high oxygen concentrations. Oxygen availability influences metabolic capacity. Higher oxygen can support more active lifestyles and potentially larger body sizes, though the relationship is complex. Carbon dioxide levels were also elevated compared to today. This contributed to global warmth and altered ocean chemistry. Marine organisms adapted accordingly. Reef systems shifted between dominance by different builders. At times, coral reefs flourished. At others, different organisms took over the structural role. Through it all, marine reptiles diversified. They occupied niches from coastal shallows to open pelagic waters. Some were specialized for deep diving. Large eye sockets in certain Ichthyosaurs suggest adaptation to low-light environments, perhaps hunting at depth. When ecosystems expand vertically as well as horizontally, opportunities multiply. The ocean is not just a surface and a bottom, it is layered. Light fades with depth, pressure increases, temperature shifts. Each layer can host different communities. In this three-dimensional world, predators can exploit space in ways terrestrial animals cannot. They can pursue prey in any direction. They can dive, ascend, glide through water columns. This added dimension changes how size functions. A large body in open water is not constrained by terrain. There are no trees to navigate, no cliffs to scale. Meanwhile, evolutionary experimentation continued. By the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, marine reptile lineages had become highly specialized. Plesiosaurs diversified into short-necked pliosaurs, some of which developed massive skulls and powerful jaws. Plesiosaurs such as Kronosaurus and Liopleurodon are estimated to have reached lengths of over 10 meters, with skulls exceeding 2 meters in length. Mosasaurs, emerging later in the Cretaceous, were descended from squamate reptiles related to modern monitor lizards and snakes. They evolved elongated bodies, paddle-like limbs and powerful tails. Some species exceeded 15 meters. Their jaws featured double-hinged mechanisms and additional rows of teeth on the roof of the mouth, adaptations for gripping slippery prey. This was a world entirely before whales, before marine mammals rose to dominance. The absence of those competitors shaped evolutionary trajectories. Marine reptiles could occupy apex predator roles without interference from large endothermic mammals. Their physiology and reproductive strategies evolved within that context. Several marine reptiles gave live birth, an adaptation crucial for fully aquatic life. Fossil evidence of ichthyosaurs preserved with embryos inside suggests that they did not need to return to land to reproduce. This freed them from coastal constraints and allowed occupation of open ocean habitats. The more completely a lineage commits to the sea, the more it can exploit pelagic resources. That commitment in turn supports greater size potential. At the same time, prey species were not passive participants. Fish evolved new swimming modes. Ammonites developed diverse shell shapes and sizes. Defensive adaptations, including speed and schooling behavior, became widespread. As prey diversified and sometimes increased in size, predators responded. The feedback loop intensified. In such an environment, the ceiling on body size rises gradually. There is no single moment when an ocean decides to produce giants. Rather, incremental changes accumulate. A slightly larger individual has a slight advantage. Over generations, average size increases. Over millions of years, what once seemed enormous becomes standard. It is also worth noting that extinction events within the Mesozoic repeatedly reshaped marine ecosystems. Smaller-scale extinctions removed dominant groups and allowed others to expand. Each reset created fresh opportunities for size escalation in surviving lineages. Throughout all of this, the fundamental structure of the planet remained conducive to marine gigantism. Extensive shallow seas, warm climates, high productivity, interconnected basins, a continuous global ocean. If you compare that to today, the contrasts become clear. Modern oceans are divided by continents into separate basins. Polar ice influences currents strongly. Human activity now alters ecosystems at a rapid pace. Marine mammals dominate large predator niches. The Mesozoic oceans were different in configuration, chemistry, and biological composition. They were not simply earlier versions of today's seas. They were a distinct system with its own rules and dynamics. Standing at the shoreline of that ancient world, you would not see whales breaching. You might see the sleek back of an Ichthyosaur breaking the surface for air. You might glimpse the long neck of a Plesiosaur rising briefly before submerging again. Beneath you, schools of fish would scatter as a shadow passed overhead. The absence of whales is not just a detail, it represents a completely different evolutionary framework. Mammals had not yet taken to the sea in large numbers. Reptiles were experimenting with forms and strategies that would never be replicated exactly again. And because of that, the stage was uniquely prepared. The rebuilding after mass extinction created empty niches. Geography provided expansive habitats. Climate stabilized productivity. Marine reptiles adapted fully to aquatic life. Prey diversified and multiplied. Over time, size increased, not as spectacle, but as consequence. As the Mesozoic progressed, this stage would support even greater escalation. Competition would sharpen. Predators would grow heavier, faster, more specialized. Arms races would intensify in the open water. By the late Cretaceous, the oceans were crowded with formidable hunters, each lineage shaped by tens of millions of years of incremental change. Yet all of it traces back to this earlier period, when the world was still recovering, reorganizing, and quietly laying the groundwork for giants. And once that groundwork was firmly in place, the physics of water itself would begin to exert even stronger influence, shaping just how large a predator could become when freed from the strict limits imposed by land. If you were to lift a fully grown marine reptile from the late Cretaceous out of the ocean and place it gently onto dry land, the first thing you would notice is not its teeth or its length, but its weight. Not just the number on a scale, but the sheer physical burden of existing without water holding it up. Limbs that functioned beautifully as paddles would struggle to support mass. The body, perfectly tuned for neutral buoyancy, would suddenly feel impossibly heavy. Water changes everything because it changes gravity. On land, gravity is constant and uncompromising. Every kilogram must be supported by bone and muscle. If an animal grows larger, its mass increases faster than the strength of its bones unless those bones become proportionally thicker. This is a fundamental principle of scaling. Volume increases with the cube of linear dimensions, while cross-sectional area, which determines strength, increases only with the square. That mismatch sets limits. Dinosaurs reached impressive sizes, certainly. Some sauropods weighed more than 50 tons, but even they were constrained by structural requirements. Their bones were massive columns. Their movement, though powerful, was limited by what those bones and muscles could bear. In water, buoyancy offsets much of this burden. Archimedes' principle states that an object submerged in a fluid experiences an upward force equal to the weight of the fluid it displaces. For a large marine predator, this means that much of its body mass is effectively supported by the surrounding water. It does not need to carry itself in the same way a land animal does. This simple physical fact opens a door. If your skeleton no longer has to fight gravity alone, you can grow longer without proportionally thickening every supporting structure. Your body can elongate, your head can enlarge, your tail can broaden for propulsion. Water distributes support evenly across your surface area. This is why the largest animals that have ever lived are marine. The blue whale surpasses even the largest dinosaurs in mass, and it could not exist on land. Its own weight would crush its organs. In the ocean, that weight is shared with the water. Now imagine the Mesozoic seas, warm and expansive, with marine reptiles evolving within this supportive medium. The moment a lineage commits fully to aquatic life, it gains access to this physical advantage. But buoyancy is only the beginning. Water is denser than air, roughly 800 times denser at sea level. Moving through it requires more energy per unit distance than moving through air. That density imposes strict demands on shape and propulsion. If you are poorly streamlined, you waste enormous amounts of energy fighting drag. Drag increases with speed and cross-sectional area. To move efficiently, a marine predator must adopt a hydrodynamic form. Over time, natural selection shapes bodies toward minimal resistance. The classic fusiform shape, tapered at both ends, appears repeatedly in marine animals across unrelated lineages. Sharks, dolphins, ichthyosaurs, different ancestry, similar solution. In the Mesozoic, ichthyosaurs evolved into some of the most streamlined vertebrates ever seen. Their bodies narrowed toward a crescent-shaped tail. Their limbs became rigid flippers, stabilizing rather than propelling. Propulsion shifted to the tail, which could generate thrust efficiently. Water demands this specialization, and specialization rewards it. Once streamlined, a predator can travel long distances without exhausting itself. Endurance hunting becomes possible. Migratory patterns expand. Territories enlarge. There is also the matter of three-dimensional space. On land, movement is largely constrained to 2 dimensions. You can move forward, backward, left, right, and to some degree up or down slopes. In water, there is no ground beneath you unless you choose to descend. You can move freely in all directions, upward, downward, diagonally. The hunting field is volumetric. This changes predator-prey dynamics profoundly. A large marine predator can approach from below, silhouetted against faint surface light. It can dive from above. It can pursue prey into deeper layers. The entire water column becomes a hunting ground. In such an environment, speed and maneuverability determine success. Size interacts with these factors in complex ways. Larger bodies often mean greater momentum. Momentum is mass times velocity. A massive predator moving at high speed carries tremendous kinetic energy. That energy can be directed into capturing or incapacitating prey. In water, where resistance slows smaller bodies more quickly, a larger animal may maintain speed more efficiently over longer distances. The relationship between size and efficiency in swimming is not linear, but many large marine animals achieve surprisingly low energy cost per unit distance travelled. There is another important feature of water: thermal properties. Water has a high specific heat capacity. It absorbs and retains heat more effectively than air. Temperature fluctuations in the ocean tend to be slower and more buffered than those on land. In the generally warm Mesozoic climate, this buffering created relatively stable marine environments over large areas. Stability supports specialization. If temperature remains within tolerable ranges for long periods, metabolic systems can adapt to consistent conditions. Marine reptiles likely varied in their thermoregulatory strategies. Some evidence suggests that certain ichthyosaurs maintained elevated body temperatures compared to ambient water, possibly through high metabolic rates or regional endothermy. A larger body retains heat more effectively due to a lower surface area to volume ratio. This principle, sometimes referred to as Bergmann's rule in ecological contexts, means that larger marine predators may have had thermal advantages. They could sustain activity in cooler or deeper waters more effectively than smaller counterparts. Thermal inertia also smooths internal fluctuations. In a stable marine climate, this can reduce physiological stress and support continuous growth over longer lifespans. Pressure is another factor that shapes life underwater. As depth increases, pressure rises rapidly. At 10 meters below the surface, pressure doubles compared to atmospheric pressure at sea level. At 100 meters, it is roughly 10 times greater. Marine predators that dive must tolerate these conditions. Larger animals often possess adaptations that allow efficient oxygen storage and pressure tolerance. In modern marine mammals, we see enlarged blood volumes, high myoglobin concentrations in muscles, and collapsible lungs that reduce nitrogen absorption at depth. While marine reptiles were not mammals, some likely developed analogous strategies. Large eye sockets in certain ichthyosaurs suggest deep diving in low light. Accessing prey at depth may have reduced competition and provided high-calorie food sources. Water also distributes nutrients differently than terrestrial environments. Ocean currents transport nutrients across vast distances. Upwelling zones bring mineral-rich water from the deep to the surface, fueling plankton blooms. Coastal runoff introduces additional nutrients. In the Mesozoic, extensive shallow seas amplified these processes. Wide continental shelves encouraged mixing and productivity. Bloom can feed millions of small organisms, which in turn support larger predators. In a three-dimensional nutrient-transporting medium like water, energy disperses differently than on land. There are fewer physical barriers. Fish schools can move across basins. Cephalopods can drift or jet propel across open water. Prey distributions shift dynamically. A large predator capable of tracking these movements gains advantage. Then there is reproduction. On land, large reptiles must lay eggs in secure locations. They are tied to terrestrial nesting grounds. In water, some lineages evolve live birth. Ichthyosaurs provide clear fossil evidence of viviparity, with embryos preserved inside adult bodies. Live birth in the ocean eliminates the need to return to land. It frees the lineage entirely from terrestrial constraints. Once freed, evolutionary pathways widen. A predator no longer needs to be capable of hauling its mass onto shore. Limbs can transform fully into paddles without compromise. Complete aquatic commitment allows bodies to optimize entirely for water. It is also worth considering visibility and detection in aquatic environments. Light attenuates with depth, colors fade, visibility depends on turbidity. Large eyes can gather more light. Enhanced sensory systems become crucial. Some marine predators likely relied heavily on vision. Others may have used lateral line systems sensitive to vibrations. In open water, prey cannot hide behind rocks or trees. Instead, it relies on speed, schooling, camouflage, or depth shifts. For predators, Being large may reduce the need for stealth. A massive pliosaur approaching at speed is a force event. Its size alone can scatter prey schools. Schooling behaviour among fish likely intensified as predation pressure increased. Dense schools confuse predators and reduce individual risk. In response, predators may have grown larger to disrupt and capture multiple prey at once. Water, by its nature, encourages such feedback loops. Scaling laws differ in aquatic environments. Metabolic demands scale with body mass in ways that can favour larger animals under certain conditions. While metabolic rate per unit mass decreases as animals grow larger, total metabolic demand increases. To support that demand, ecosystems must be robust. In the Mesozoic, they were. Another physical factor is sound. Sound travels faster and farther in water than in air. Although we do not have direct evidence of acoustic hunting in marine reptiles, it is reasonable to assume that sound propagation influenced predator-prey interactions. Large bodies moving through water generate low-frequency vibrations detectable over distance. A large predator might announce its presence, but it might also sense distant movement. Communication and detection in such an environment favour adaptations different from those on land. Water also shapes injury and survival differently. A terrestrial predator that injures a limb may be severely compromised. In water, propulsion often relies on the tail rather than weight-bearing limbs. An injured flipper might reduce maneuverability but not eliminate mobility. This may influence survivorship and longevity, indirectly supporting growth to larger sizes. There is an additional factor rarely considered: time. The Mesozoic lasted nearly 186 million years. That is an immense span for evolutionary experimentation. When conditions remain favourable over tens of millions of years, incremental trends toward increased size can accumulate without frequent resets. Marine reptiles had the luxury of time within relatively stable oceanic frameworks. Even when extinctions occurred within the Mesozoic, many marine lineages persisted and rediversified. Water, therefore, did not simply allow larger bodies mechanically. It created a dynamic, buffered, nutrient-rich, three-dimensional environment in which size could confer repeated advantages. Contrast this with terrestrial ecosystems, where drought, seasonal variation, and habitat fragmentation often impose sharper constraints. Land animals must contend with gravity directly, with barriers like mountains and deserts with patchy food sources. In the ocean, barriers are fewer. Distance is vast but continuous. A predator can traverse entire basins without encountering physical obstructions. When you combine buoyancy, three-dimensional mobility, thermal buffering, nutrient transport, and long-term climatic warmth, you create a system primed for gigantism. This does not mean every marine lineage grew enormous. Many remained small or medium-sized, but those that found ecological advantage in increasing size faced fewer physical penalties than their terrestrial counterparts. Over time, natural selection nudged certain predators upward in scale. A slightly larger pliosaur could tackle slightly larger prey. A larger mosasaur might dominate broader territories. With each incremental increase, new thresholds became possible. The ocean did not force gigantism, it permitted it. And once permitted, ecological competition amplified it. As prey grew larger and more numerous, predators responded. As predators grew larger, prey evolved defensive strategies. This reciprocal escalation unfolded within a medium uniquely suited to sustaining large bodies. If you were to float above a late Cretaceous sea and look down through clear warm water, you might see shadows moving below. Some would be fish, some cephalopods, some smaller reptiles, and among them occasionally something vast, its body supported by buoyancy, its movements governed by hydrodynamics, its growth enabled by nutrient flows and climatic stability. Water did not simply surround these giants, it shaped every aspect of their existence. and with the stage set by physics and fluid dynamics, the next layer of explanation lies not in mechanics alone, but in the planet's chemistry and climate, which together fueled the biological engine that allowed such immense predators to thrive. If you strip away the scales, the teeth, the long necks and paddle-shaped limbs, and look only at numbers, something becomes immediately clear. Size is not just a biological story, it is a physics story. Every large predator in the Mesozoic ocean was bound by the same fundamental laws that govern planets and pebbles alike. Mass, force, energy, pressure. There is no evolutionary shortcut around them. And yet, within those laws, the ocean offered a set of conditions that made extreme size not only possible, but in certain contexts advantageous. Begin with buoyancy, because without it, none of the rest holds together. On land, if an animal doubles in length, its volume increases by roughly 8 times. That means 8 times the mass. But the strength of bones, which depends on cross-sectional area, increases only 4 times if dimensions double. This imbalance creates what engineers call a scaling problem. If you keep enlarging an animal without thickening its support structures disproportionately, those supports fail. Marine reptiles did not have to fight that imbalance in the same way. Submerged in seawater, a body displaces fluid equal to its own volume. The upward buoyant force equals the weight of that displaced water. If body density is close to that of seawater, the effective weight is dramatically reduced. A 10-ton marine reptile in water does not bear 10 tons through its skeleton. Much of that load is offset. This changes how mass behaves. Instead of designing bones solely to resist gravity, evolution can allocate resources differently. Bones may become lighter in some regions, denser in others for ballast. Limbs can flatten and widen into hydrofoils rather than remain rigid pillars. Ichthyosaurs demonstrate this clearly. Their vertebrae are tightly packed, forming a stiff axial column optimized for tail-driven propulsion. Their ribs and limb bones reflect aquatic specialization rather than terrestrial support. Buoyancy does not eliminate gravity, but it reduces its mechanical consequences. That reduction creates room for scale. Pressure is the next constraint. As depth increases, pressure rises by approximately 1 atmosphere every 10 meters. At 100 meters, pressure is roughly 11 times that at sea level. At 1,000 meters, it exceeds 100 atmospheres. Marine reptiles likely occupied a range of depths. Fossil evidence of large eye sockets in some ichthyosaurs suggests adaptation to low-light conditions, possibly indicating deeper hunting behaviours. Pressure influences physiology. Air-filled cavities compress. Gas exchange changes. Structural integrity becomes critical. Large bodies can have advantages here as well. With increased volume relative to surface area, certain pressure effects distribute differently. In diving mammals today, lungs collapse safely at depth, reducing nitrogen absorption. While marine reptiles were not mammals, some may have evolved mechanisms to manage pressure through controlled lung compression or modified respiratory strategies. Large size also increases total oxygen storage capacity, if supported by appropriate blood volume and muscle adaptations. A bigger animal can store more oxygen overall, potentially allowing longer dives. Then there is power. Power is the rate at which work is done. In swimming, work is done against drag. Drag force increases with the square of velocity and depends on fluid density, cross-sectional area, and drag coefficient. To swim faster, an animal must generate exponentially more power. A larger predator has more muscle mass. Muscle mass scales roughly with body mass. Absolute power output increases with size. However, metabolic rate does not scale linearly. Per unit mass, larger animals typically use less energy than smaller ones. This creates interesting trade-offs. A large marine predator can generate significant bursts of force, propelling its body forward with immense momentum. Momentum, mass times velocity, allows it to overcome inertia of prey and water alike. Consider a pliosaur accelerating toward a large fish. Its mass means that once moving it carries substantial kinetic energy. Prey must evade not just speed, but mass in motion. Hydrodynamics also favours certain sizes for efficiency. The Reynolds number, a dimensionless quantity in fluid mechanics, describes the ratio of inertial forces to viscous forces in a fluid. At high Reynolds numbers, inertial forces dominate and flow tends to be turbulent. Larger animals swimming at higher speeds operate in high Reynolds number regimes, where viscous drag becomes relatively less significant compared to pressure drag. In simpler terms, very small animals experience water as thick and resistant. For larger animals, the relative impact of viscosity decreases. This can make certain modes of propulsion more efficient at scale. Tail-driven propulsion, seen in Ichthyosaurs and later in mosasaurs, relies on generating thrust through oscillation. The larger the tail and the stronger the musculature, the greater the thrust potential. Provided the body is streamlined, increasing size can enhance propulsion efficiency for sustained cruising. Energy budgets matter enormously. To grow large, an animal must consistently take in more energy than it expends. In the Mesozoic oceans, warm temperatures and expansive shallow seas supported high primary productivity. Phytoplankton converted sunlight into chemical energy at large scales. That energy moved upward through food webs. At each trophic level, energy is lost, often around 90% between levels. For a 10-ton predator to survive, the base of the food web must be massive. In the Mesozoic, evidence from sediment deposits and fossil assemblages suggests prolonged periods of high marine productivity. Power is not only about movement, it is also about feeding. Jaw mechanics illustrate this. The force generated by jaws depends on muscle size, attachment geometry, and lever mechanics. Larger skulls allow for larger muscle attachments. A pliosaur with a 2-meter skull could anchor enormous jaw muscles, producing bite forces capable of crushing bone or gripping large prey securely. Bite force scales with muscle cross-sectional area. As skull size increases, muscle area increases roughly with the square of linear dimensions, while prey mass increases with the cube. This suggests limits, but in aquatic environments, prey buoyancy reduces effective weight. A predator does not need to lift the full weight of prey against gravity, as a terrestrial predator might. When a mosasaur seized a large fish, or another reptile, it did so in a medium where both bodies were supported. This reduces the mechanical burden of handling large prey. Water also transmits force differently. A struggling prey animal pushes against water resistance. Larger predators can exploit this by using momentum to overwhelm resistance. Thermal physics plays another role. Heat exchange in water occurs faster than in air due to higher thermal conductivity. Maintaining body temperature in water can be energetically expensive. Larger bodies lose heat more slowly because of lower surface area to volume ratios. This thermal advantage may have supported sustained activity in cooler waters or at depth. Some marine reptiles show isotopic evidence suggesting elevated body temperatures relative to surrounding water. If certain lineages achieved partial endothermy, larger size would enhance its efficiency. Mechanical stress distribution differs in water as well. When a terrestrial animal runs, its limbs experience repeated impact forces. Stress fractures and joint wear accumulate. In water, propulsion relies on muscular contraction against fluid resistance rather than impact with solid ground. This reduces repetitive shock loading. A large marine predator does not experience the same skeletal pounding as a similarly sized terrestrial runner. Reduced impact stress may allow longer lifespans and continued growth. Longevity contributes to size. If an animal continues growing slowly throughout life, extended lifespan increases maximum size. Stable marine conditions and reduced injury risk from falls or collisions with hard terrain may support longer average lifespans. Sound and vibration physics also shape predation. Low-frequency sound travels farther in water than high-frequency sound. Large bodies moving through water generate low-frequency vibrations detectable over distance. Sensory systems capable of detecting these vibrations would provide advantages. A large predator might sense distant prey movement through pressure changes. Conversely, prey might detect approaching giants early, creating selective pressure for stealth or ambush strategies. Power generation ties directly into muscle physiology. Muscle power depends on fiber type and metabolic capacity. Sustained swimming requires endurance-oriented muscle fibers. Burst attacks require fast-twitch fibers. Large marine predators likely possessed combinations enabling both cruising and rapid acceleration. The mechanical efficiency of swimming increases with body size under certain conditions. Larger animals often achieve lower cost of transport per unit mass. That means travelling long distances may be energetically cheaper per kilogram for larger bodies. Migration and wide-ranging hunting become feasible. In the Mesozoic, with interconnected seas and high sea levels, large predators could exploit resources across broad geographic areas. Their power output and efficiency allowed them to traverse basins in search of prey. There is also inertia to consider. Inertia resists changes in motion. A large body resists acceleration but also resists deceleration. Once moving at speed, a massive predator maintains that speed unless acted upon by significant opposing force. In hunting, this can be advantageous. A high-speed charge carries through prey schools, potentially capturing multiple individuals or creating chaos, but inertia can also limit maneuverability. Larger predators may turn more slowly. This trade-off influences hunting strategy. Some lineages evolved long necks, like Plesiosaurs, possibly to extend reach without requiring full-body maneuvering. A long neck allows the head to sweep through schools while the bulk of the body remains stable. This may be mechanically advantageous in certain prey environments. Water density also influences structural support of soft tissues. Large animals on land must support internal organs against gravity. In water, organ weight is partially offset. This reduces stress on connective tissues and may allow different internal arrangements. Pressure distribution across the body is more uniform underwater. Structural reinforcement can be optimized for propulsion rather than weight bearing. All these physical considerations create a framework. Within that framework, evolution experiments. If the physics had been hostile to large size, no amount of ecological opportunity would have produced 10 or 20 meter predators. But the physics was permissive. Buoyancy reduced effective weight. Pressure selected for robust but adaptable physiology. Fluid dynamics rewarded streamlined forms and efficient propulsion. Thermal properties buffered environmental extremes. Power generation scaled with muscle mass, and the cost of transport decreased per unit mass for larger swimmers under favourable conditions. This convergence of mechanical factors did not guarantee gigantism, it allowed it, and once allowed, ecological forces could push size upward when advantageous. When you imagine a late Jurassic pliosaur surging forward in pursuit of prey, what you are seeing is not just a biological organism. You are seeing physics expressed through muscle and bone. The ocean held that body up. The water resisted its motion, demanding power. The predator's muscles responded with force. Pressure surrounded it evenly. Heat flowed slowly across its massive surface. Every movement was a negotiation with physical law, and in that negotiation, the Mesozoic ocean offered terms that were unusually favourable to giants. With physics establishing what was possible, the next layer lies in how climate and atmospheric chemistry amplified those possibilities, creating oceans rich enough to feed the most formidable predators Earth has ever seen. If physics explains how something as large as a marine giant could exist, chemistry and climate explain why it did. A body the size of a bus packed with muscle, bone and organ tissue does not grow on mechanics alone. It requires oxygen. It requires warmth. It requires a planet that is not just stable, but energetically active. During much of the Mesozoic, Earth was exactly that. Start with temperature, because temperature shapes nearly every biological process. For most of the Mesozoic era, global climates were significantly warmer than today. There were no permanent polar ice caps for long stretches of time. Even high latitudes experienced relatively mild conditions. Fossil evidence from polar regions shows forests growing where today there is ice and tundra. Warm oceans behave differently than cold ones. They expand, raising sea levels. They circulate differently, altering current systems. They influence the distribution of nutrients and the pace of biological productivity. Higher global temperatures also increase rates of chemical reactions within organisms. Metabolism, growth, digestion, and reproduction all depend on temperature-sensitive biochemical processes. In warm marine environments, cold-blooded animals, and even partially warm-blooded ones, can maintain high activity levels without expending as much energy on internal heat production. Marine reptiles likely benefited from this. While it is still debated how fully endothermic some groups were, isotopic evidence suggests that certain Ichthyosaurs and Plesiosaurs may have maintained body temperatures above ambient water levels. Even if they were not fully warm-blooded in the mammalian sense, the warm oceans would have reduced thermal stress and allowed for sustained movement and feeding. Warm water also increases evaporation rates, intensifying the hydrological cycle. More evaporation leads to more precipitation over land, which leads to increased erosion. Rivers carry sediments and nutrients into the ocean. Those nutrients feed phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are the foundation of marine food webs. They convert sunlight, carbon dioxide, and nutrients into organic matter through photosynthesis. When phytoplankton populations expand, everything above them in the food chain benefits. In the Mesozoic, with elevated atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, plant productivity on land and in the ocean was often high. Carbon dioxide concentrations were several times modern levels during certain intervals. This greenhouse atmosphere trapped heat, sustaining global warmth. High CO2 levels also affect ocean chemistry. Increased carbon availability can enhance phytoplankton growth under the right nutrient conditions. Combined with nutrient influx from extensive shallow seas and continental runoff, marine primary productivity likely reached substantial levels during many periods. The phrase, "planet in overdrive," is not exaggeration. Volcanic activity was frequent during the Mesozoic. Large igneous provinces, vast eruptions covering millions of square kilometers, released enormous amounts of gases into the atmosphere. These eruptions influence climate, ocean chemistry, and atmospheric composition. Volcanic outgassing released carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, reinforcing warmth. It also released nutrients such as iron, which in marine systems can stimulate phytoplankton blooms. Iron is often a limiting nutrient in ocean ecosystems. Even small increases can trigger substantial growth in primary producers. In a warm, shallow, nutrient-mixed ocean, these boosts could cascade upward through trophic levels. Oxygen is central to this entire picture. Atmospheric oxygen levels fluctuated during the Mesozoic. While not as high as during the Carboniferous period, when giant insects thrived under elevated oxygen concentrations, Mesozoic oxygen levels were generally sufficient to support large vertebrate metabolism. Oxygen dissolves in seawater. The amount dissolved depends on temperature and pressure. Cold water holds more oxygen than warm water, but circulation patterns redistribute oxygen-rich surface water into deeper layers. In productive systems, photosynthesis by phytoplankton generates oxygen as a byproduct. In shallow, sunlit seas, oxygen levels can be high near the surface. Large predators cruising in these layers would have access to well-oxygenated water. However, high productivity can also create oxygen-poor zones when organic matter sinks and decomposes, consuming oxygen. The balance between production and decomposition shapes oxygen distribution. Evidence from marine sediments indicates that certain Mesozoic intervals experience widespread anoxic events, periods when large portions of the ocean became oxygen depleted. These events often correspond with massive volcanic activity and climate shifts. Yet outside these extreme intervals, oxygen levels were generally adequate to sustain active marine life, including large predators. Large bodies require efficient oxygen transport systems. Even if marine reptiles were not as metabolically intense as modern marine mammals, their size alone implies substantial oxygen demand. Blood volume, heart size, lung capacity, and muscle oxygen storage would have scaled accordingly. Warm seas would have reduced metabolic costs associated with thermoregulation, allowing more energy to be allocated to growth and hunting. Warm climates also lengthen growing seasons. In tropical and subtropical waters, primary productivity can occur year-round rather than seasonally. Consistent food supply reduces starvation risk and supports steady growth. Seasonality was less extreme in many Mesozoic regions due to reduced temperature gradients. This consistency would have minimized boom and bust cycles in some ecosystems. Now consider sea level. High global temperatures cause thermal expansion of seawater and reduce ice storage at poles. During much of the Mesozoic, sea levels were significantly higher than today. Large portions of continental interiors were submerged beneath shallow epicontinental seas. These shallow seas are biologically rich. Sunlight penetrates to the bottom across wide areas. Nutrient mixing is efficient. Coastal habitats expand dramatically. The western interior seaway in the late Cretaceous is a prime example. Stretching from the Arctic to the Gulf of Mexico, it divided North America into two land masses. Fossil evidence from this seaway reveals abundant fish, ammonites, sharks, and marine reptiles. An environment like that can support enormous biomass, and where biomass accumulates, predators follow. Warm seas also influence evolutionary pace. Higher metabolic rates can accelerate growth and reproduction in many organisms. Faster generation times at lower trophic levels mean more rapid prey turnover. Predators benefit from abundant juvenile prey populations. At the same time, warm climates reduce the energetic costs of maintaining activity. A large predator cruising through warm water expends less energy, combating cold stress than one in frigid seas. This matters over millions of years. If conditions consistently favour efficient growth and sustained feeding, lineages can trend toward larger average size, not in sudden leaps, but through steady incremental increases. The Mesozoic also saw major innovations in marine ecosystems. Teleost fish diversified dramatically. Cephalopods such as ammonites and belemnites proliferated. New prey types emerged. Each innovation reshaped energy flow. Diverse prey means more ecological niches. Large predators can specialize or generalize. Some marine reptiles developed crushing teeth for armored prey. Others evolved sharp, conical teeth for seizing fish and squid. An abundant and diverse prey base reduces reliance on any single food source. This flexibility can buffer large predators against local fluctuations. Warm climates may also influence distribution patterns. Without extensive polar ice, marine habitats extended farther toward the poles. Fossils of marine reptiles have been found in what are now high-latitude regions, indicating that these animals occupied wide geographic ranges. Wide distribution increases population resilience. If conditions deteriorate in one region, populations elsewhere can persist. This geographic spread supports long-term evolutionary trends. Volcanism and tectonic activity during the Mesozoic continuously reshaped ocean basins. Seafloor spreading altered currents. Mountain building influenced erosion and nutrient runoff. These dynamic processes kept the planet chemically active. In some intervals, particularly during oceanic anoxic events, environmental stress may have temporarily reduced biodiversity. Yet such events also reset ecosystems, allowing surviving lineages to diversify into newly vacant niches. After each reset, the cycle of expansion resumed. Warmth, oxygen availability, nutrient supply, and geographic configuration combined to create oceans that were not merely habitable, but highly productive. Imagine drifting above a late Jurassic shallow sea. Sunlight filters through warm water, plankton blooms invisibly beneath the surface, small fish dart in schools, larger fish pursue them, cephalopods pulse through mid-water. At the top of this layered system, a massive predator moves steadily. Its muscles are supplied with oxygen-rich blood. Its body temperature is stable in warm currents. Its prey is abundant. Its environment extends for thousands of kilometers without interruption. Under such conditions, natural selection does not penalize size as harshly as it might in colder, fragmented or resource-poor systems. A planet in overdrive produces ecosystems in overdrive. It is important not to romanticize this period as endlessly benign. The Mesozoic experienced extinctions, climate swings and chemical disruptions. But over the long arc of nearly 186 million years, the general trend favoured high marine productivity and expansive warm seas. These conditions are rare in Earth's history. They represent a particular alignment of atmospheric composition, tectonic arrangement, volcanic activity and solar input. When that alignment occurred, it amplified the mechanical permissiveness of water. Buoyancy allowed large bodies. Warmth reduced metabolic strain. Oxygen supported active tissues. Nutrients fed expansive food webs. Together they created a system capable of sustaining predators at scales that still feel improbable. And as productivity intensified, interactions between species sharpened. Competition increased. Predators encountered rivals of comparable size and strength. Out of that pressure would emerge not just large animals, but a full ecological arms race, one that pushed marine reptiles toward even greater extremes. Stand on a modern map and trace the edges of the continents with your finger. Notice how the Atlantic narrows between the Americas and Africa, how the Pacific is broken by island chains, how the Indian Ocean is enclosed on three sides. Our oceans today are vast, but they are divided, partitioned by land that interrupts currents and reshapes climate. Now erase those divisions. Win the clock back to the early Mesozoic, and the world looks radically different. Nearly all major landmasses are fused into a single supercontinent known as Pangea. It stretches from near the South Pole to the North Pole, an immense continuous expanse of land. Surrounding it is a global ocean called Panthalassa, so broad that it wraps almost uninterrupted around the planet. This configuration changes everything about how water moves, how nutrients circulate, and how life spreads. An ocean without limits does not mean an ocean without structure. Currents still flow, temperature gradients still exist, but the absence of multiple large continental barriers allows for long, sweeping current systems. Water masses can travel immense distances without encountering land. In such a system, marine populations are less isolated. Genetic exchange across vast regions becomes more likely. Species can expand ranges broadly, occupying ecological space on continental scales, rather than being confined to regional basins. For large predators, this matters. A massive marine reptile is not well suited to tiny enclosed seas. It requires territory. It requires migration routes. It requires prey populations large enough to sustain its energy needs. In a world dominated by one enormous ocean, those conditions are easier to meet. The coastline of Pangea was extraordinarily long. When you have one supercontinent, its perimeter becomes a nearly continuous band of coastal habitat, stretching thousands upon thousands of kilometers. Along that band lie shallow continental shelves. Shallow seas are the engines of marine productivity. Sunlight penetrates to the bottom across wide areas. Photosynthesis flourishes. Nutrients from land flow directly into coastal waters through rivers and runoff. With Pangea's immense size, river systems would have drained vast interior regions. Sediments rich in minerals entered coastal zones, fertilizing plankton blooms. These blooms fed zooplankton, which fed fish, and cephalopods, which fed marine reptiles. An endless coastline is not just scenic, it is ecological infrastructure. As the Mesozoic progressed, Pangea began to break apart. Tectonic forces pulled land masses away from one another, opening new ocean basins. The Tethys Ocean widened between Laurasia in the north and Gondwana in the south. Later, the Atlantic Ocean began to form. At first glance, fragmentation might seem to limit marine expanses, but in reality, this breakup increased the length of coastlines even further. As continents rifted, new shallow margins formed, new inland seas appeared, continental shelves expanded in complex patterns. Sea level during much of the Mesozoic was high. Thermal expansion of warm seawater and lack of polar ice allowed oceans to flood continental interiors. Epicontinental seas formed, sometimes covering entire regions. These shallow interior seas created additional habitats of immense productivity. The Western Interior Seaway in the late Cretaceous provides a vivid example. It divided North America into two land masses, creating a long, narrow sea teeming with life. Fossil deposits from this seaway show abundant fish, ammonites, sharks, and large marine reptiles. Multiply that scenario across multiple continents over tens of millions of years, and you begin to see the scale. An ocean without limits also affects climate stability. Large continuous ocean surfaces moderate temperature differences between equator and poles. Currents distribute heat across wide latitudes. This reduces extreme seasonal variation in many coastal regions. Stable climates support long-term ecological investment. If a lineage can rely on relatively predictable environmental conditions, it can specialize deeply. Specialization can lead to efficiency. Efficiency can support larger body size. Currents in such a vast ocean would have been powerful and persistent. Ocean circulation transports nutrients from deep waters to surface zones through upwelling. Upwelling regions are among the most productive marine ecosystems today. In the Mesozoic, widespread upwelling along extensive continental margins would have fueled plankton blooms at scale. For large predators, this means prey is not confined to isolated pockets. Schools of fish could follow nutrient-rich currents across long distances. Cephalopods could thrive in nutrient-dense regions. Marine reptiles could track these migrations. There were fewer geographic dead ends. Today, many large marine species migrate seasonally between feeding and breeding grounds. In the Mesozoic, such migrations could have been even more expansive due to the sheer continuity of marine habitat. Connectivity reduces vulnerability to local extinction. If a regional ecosystem collapses, species with wide distributions can persist elsewhere. For giants, range matters. A 10 or 15 meter predator requires substantial feeding grounds. If confined to a small basin, prey depletion could quickly threaten survival. In a world-spanning ocean, movement offers resilience. The structure of continental shelves also influences wave energy and sediment deposition. Shallow, broad shelves slow wave action, creating calmer coastal environments in some regions. Such conditions may favour nursery grounds for juvenile marine reptiles. Reproduction in open water is risky for small offspring. Shallow productive seas may provide relative safety and abundant food for growing juveniles. If young individuals can mature in rich coastal zones before venturing into open ocean, survival rates improve. The geometry of the planet during the Mesozoic fostered this kind of layered habitat structure. Open ocean basins for adults, shallow seas for juveniles, continuous coastlines for migration. Tectonic activity did more than rearrange continents. It influenced volcanic outgassing, seafloor spreading rates, and ocean chemistry. Newly formed ocean crust interacts with seawater, altering mineral composition. Hydrothermal vents release nutrients into deep water. Hydrothermal systems contribute iron and other elements essential for phytoplankton growth. In a tectonically active world, these contributions may have been significant. An ocean without limits is not stagnant. It is dynamic. Large-scale circulation patterns influence oxygen distribution. Surface waters absorb oxygen from the atmosphere and transport it downward. In extensive, well-mixed systems, oxygen availability can support large, active organisms across broad regions. Of course, there were periods when ocean circulation slowed or became stratified, leading to anoxic events. But these episodes were punctuations within longer spans of productive marine life. Another factor is isolation and speciation. While the global ocean was continuous, the breakup of Pangea gradually created semi-enclosed seas. These acted as evolutionary laboratories. Populations isolated by geography could diverge genetically. New species emerged. Some of these species would experiment with size. For example, distinct mosasaur lineages evolved in different regions during the late Cretaceous. Regional variation in prey types and competition may have driven size differentiation. An endless coastline does not mean uniformity. It means opportunity across gradients. Tropical Tethyan waters differed from higher latitude seas. Coastal shallows differed from deep basins. Each zone presented different pressures and resources. The sheer length of continental margins during the Mesozoic also meant more reef systems. Reef ecosystems are biodiversity hotspots. They support complex food webs with multiple trophic levels. Large predators do not feed directly on reefs, but reefs sustain populations of fish and invertebrates that move into open waters. Reef productivity spills outward. Imagine a chain of reef systems stretching along thousands of kilometers of warm coastline. Each acts as a biological engine, feeding energy into adjacent marine zones. In such a world, large predators are not anomalies, they are expected outcomes. Geographic continuity also influences evolutionary timescales. When habitats are stable and extensive, lineages can persist without severe bottlenecks. Long uninterrupted evolutionary histories allow gradual trends to accumulate. The Mesozoic lasted nearly 186 million years. Within that span, continental configuration shifted slowly compared to the pace of ecological interactions. Marine reptile lineages had tens of millions of years to expand, compete, and refine their adaptations. An ocean without limits also means fewer physical obstacles to dispersal. On land, mountains and deserts fragment populations. In the ocean, except for temperature gradients and current systems, barriers are less obvious. A powerful swimmer can cross vast distances. Wide dispersal can spread advantageous traits rapidly. If a mutation supports increased size or improved hunting efficiency, it can propagate across large regions. This does not imply uniform giant size everywhere. It implies that conditions supporting gigantism were not geographically rare. Modern oceans, while large, are divided by continents in ways that shape current systems and create enclosed basins. The Mediterranean, for example, is semi-enclosed. The Caribbean is partially isolated. The Pacific and Atlantic differ in depth and nutrient flow. In the Mesozoic, Panthalassa was dominant and immense. Even as it shrank with continental breakup, ocean basins remained expansive relative to modern divisions. Large predators benefit from scale. Scale in geography mirrors scale in biology. When you place a massive marine reptile into a world where coastlines stretch uninterrupted, where shallow seas blanket continental interiors, where warm currents connect distant habitats, and where prey species flourish across entire basins, you remove many of the ecological ceilings that might otherwise restrain size. It becomes easier to imagine a 15-metre mosasaur patrolling the length of an inland sea, or a 20-metre Ichthyosaur crossing open ocean in pursuit of migrating prey. The world itself did not confine them. Instead, it offered room to grow, room to roam, room to compete. And when room is abundant and resources are widespread, evolution can afford to experiment with extremes. By the time the continents drifted into more familiar positions and marine mammals began to rise in prominence, the particular configuration that had fostered marine reptile gigantism was already fading. But during the height of the Mesozoic, the ocean was as close to limitless as Earth has ever allowed. Within that vast, warm, nutrient-fueled system, the stage was set not just for large predators, but for a complex food web strong enough to support them. And it is within that food web, dense and layered and relentless, that the true engine of gigantism becomes visible. A predator the size of a school bus does not exist because it is impressive. It exists because the system beneath it can carry the weight. In any ecosystem, the largest hunters are supported by layers of life below them. Remove enough from the base and the top collapses. Strengthen the base and the top can grow. In the Mesozoic oceans, the base was not just strong. For long stretches of time, it was immense. To understand how marine reptiles reached extraordinary sizes, you have to stop looking first at teeth and start looking at plankton. Everything begins with sunlight. Sunlight penetrates the upper layer of the ocean, the photic zone. Within this zone, microscopic organisms called phytoplankton convert light into chemical energy through photosynthesis. They use carbon dioxide dissolved in seawater, along with nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, to build organic molecules. These phytoplankton are tiny, many are single-celled, individually insignificant. Collectively, they are the foundation of marine ecosystems. In the warm, shallow seas of the Mesozoic, phytoplankton thrived. High sea levels meant broad continental shelves where sunlight could reach the seafloor. Rivers carried nutrients from vast interior lands into coastal waters. Tectonic activity and volcanic outgassing added trace minerals such as iron to the oceans. Under the right conditions, plankton populations explode. Blooms can cover hundreds or thousands of square kilometres, invisible from the shore without modern instruments but biologically enormous. When phytoplankton multiply, zooplankton follow. Zooplankton include tiny animals and larval stages of larger organisms. They feed on phytoplankton, converting plant energy into animal tissue. Small fish feed on zooplankton. Larger fish feed on those small fish. Squid and other cephalopods feed at multiple levels. Energy moves upward, losing some at each transfer, but building biomass at every stage. In the Mesozoic oceans, this upward cascade supported a staggering variety of mid-level predators. Teleost fish diversified extensively. They developed new jaw mechanics, new swimming modes, and new ecological strategies. Ammonites, with their coiled shells, were abundant and varied in size from a few centimetres to more than a metre in diameter. They occupied mid-water niches, feeding on plankton and small organisms. In turn, they became prey for larger hunters. Belemnites, squid-like cephalopods with internal shells, darted through open water. Crustaceans and other invertebrates populated reefs and seafloors. Each level reinforced the next. The more diverse and abundant the mid-level organisms, the more stable the food web becomes. Stability is crucial for gigantism. If prey populations fluctuate wildly or collapse frequently, large predators cannot sustain themselves. They require consistent intake. A 10-ton predator missing meals for extended periods cannot simply shrink to compensate. The Mesozoic marine food web during its most productive intervals was dense. Consider a late Jurassic shallow sea. Phytoplankton bloom beneath the surface. Zooplankton graze continuously. Small fish school in vast numbers, feeding on the plankton. Larger predatory fish hunt the small fish. Cephalopods prey on fish and each other. Above them cruise marine reptiles. Ichthyosaurs, shaped like dolphins but unrelated, hunted fish and squid. Some species had long, narrow snouts filled with sharp teeth, ideal for seizing slippery prey. Others developed broader jaws capable of tackling larger animals. Plesiosaurs occupied different niches. Long-necked forms may have used stealth and precision, sweeping their heads through fish schools. Short-necked pliosaurs with massive skulls and powerful jaws likely attacked larger prey, including other marine reptiles. Later, mosasaurs emerged as apex predators in many regions. With flexible skulls and additional teeth on the palate, they could grip and swallow large prey effectively. None of these predators existed in isolation. Competition among them intensified over time. When multiple large predators share an ecosystem, selective pressure sharpens. If one lineage grows slightly larger, it may dominate a particular prey size range. Others must adapt by shifting diet, altering hunting strategy, or increasing size themselves. This is how escalation occurs. If a pliosaur capable of crushing bone emerges, prey species may evolve thicker armour or greater speed. In response, predators may increase jaw strength or improve manoeuvrability. Over millions of years, this reciprocal pressure pushes traits toward extremes. But again, escalation only continues if the base remains strong. The Mesozoic oceans were not simply warm, they were productive across large regions. Sedimentary records from marine deposits show thick accumulations of organic rich layers, indicating sustained biological activity. Reef systems flourished in many intervals, built by corals and other organisms. Reefs support high biodiversity. Fish populations near reefs can be dense and varied. Even predators that primarily hunt in open water may benefit from reef-associated prey dispersing into surrounding seas. Schooling behaviour among fish likely intensified under predation pressure. Large schools reduce individual risk through confusion effects, but dense schools also create concentrated energy sources. A giant predator charging through a tightly packed fish school may capture multiple individuals in a single burst. Energy intake per hunting event matters. A larger predator needs to consume more food overall, but it may also be capable of targeting larger prey items that offer higher caloric return per capture. In marine systems, large prey can be buoyant or neutrally buoyant. This reduces the mechanical cost of subduing them compared to terrestrial hunts, where gravity must be overcome to lift or carry prey. An Ichthyosaur or mosasaur attacking a large fish does not need to hoist it off the ground. Both predator and prey are suspended. Cephalopods, particularly ammonites and belemnites, were abundant and varied. Some ammonites reached considerable size, offering substantial caloric reward. Their shells, though protective, could be crushed by powerful jaws. Fossil evidence reveals bite marks on ammonite shells and bones of marine reptiles bearing signs of predation by other marine reptiles. The food web included intrageld predation. Large predators sometimes ate other large predators. This internal recycling of energy further concentrated biomass in top tiers. The presence of multiple predator lineages at large size suggests that the food web could support more than one apex consumer simultaneously. That implies extraordinary underlying productivity. Marine invertebrates also played a role. Crinoids, bivalves, and other filter feeders processed plankton, converting it into larger, more accessible biomass. Some fish specialized in feeding on these invertebrates, becoming prey themselves. Energy in the Mesozoic ocean moved upward through many channels. There were likely seasonal fluctuations, regional differences, and occasional collapses during anoxic events. But over long stretches, the system rebounded. Evolutionary time is forgiving when spans measure in millions of years. Temporary setbacks do not prevent long-term trends toward increased complexity and scale. One often overlooked factor in food web strength is reproductive strategy. Many marine organisms produce large numbers of offspring. High fecundity at lower trophic levels ensures constant replenishment. Even if predation removes vast numbers of individuals, populations can recover quickly. This resilience supports sustained predator pressure. Marine reptiles themselves adopted reproductive strategies that enhanced survival. Ichthyosaurs gave live birth in water, avoiding vulnerable egg-laying on land. This may have increased juvenile survival rates compared to species forced to return to shore. Higher juvenile survival feeds into population stability. Population stability supports size trends. If adult mortality is not excessively high and food supply remains reliable, individuals can grow over longer periods. Some marine reptiles likely experienced indeterminate growth, continuing to grow slowly throughout life. Extended lifespans combined with steady growth can produce enormous individuals. The vertical dimension of the ocean adds further complexity to the food web. Different depths host distinct communities. Surface waters teem with plankton and small fish. Midwater zones contain larger fish and cephalopods. Deeper layers may harbour slower-moving but substantial prey. Large predators capable of diving can exploit multiple layers. This flexibility reduces reliance on a single prey type. Modern marine mammals like sperm whales dive to great depths for squid. While marine reptiles were physiologically different, fossil evidence suggests that at least some ichthyosaurs hunted in deeper waters. Access to diverse prey sources buffers against scarcity. The Mesozoic ocean also lacked some of the modern constraints imposed by human activity. There was no industrial fishing, no large-scale pollution, no artificial habitat fragmentation. Predator-prey dynamics operated under natural feedback loops without external interference. This allowed the food web to develop and maintain complexity over geological timescales. When you imagine a giant pliosaur or mosasaur, it is easy to focus on its size as spectacle, but that size is a visible indicator of invisible abundance beneath it. For every apex predator, there were millions of smaller organisms converting sunlight into usable energy. The phrase "built monsters" is not hyperbole in this context. The food web literally constructed the conditions necessary for marine gigantism. Each plankton cell captured light, each zooplankton grazed, each small fish consumed dozens or hundreds of plankton, each larger fish consumed dozens of smaller fish. Multiply that chain across entire shallow seas stretching for thousands of kilometres, sustained year after year under warm climates and high sea levels. At the top of that pyramid, a predator grows. It grows because there is enough to eat. It grows because competition favours increased size. It grows because physics allows it. It grows because the ocean itself is rich. When the Mesozoic ended with the mass extinction at 66 million years ago, much of this structure collapsed. Plankton communities were disrupted. Food chains fractured. Large marine reptiles disappeared. The disappearance itself underscores the dependence on the food web. Without a strong base, the top cannot stand. But during the height of the Mesozoic, the base was strong enough to support predators of unprecedented scale. And within that thriving network of energy transfer, certain lineages began to rise above the rest, refining their bodies into forms that would dominate open water for millions of years. Long before mosasaurs patrolled inland seas and long before marine mammals evolved streamlined bodies and tail flukes, another lineage had already solved the problem of life in open water. They did not ease gradually into the ocean over tens of millions of years. They appeared relatively early in the Triassic period, not long after the greatest mass extinction Earth had ever known, and once they arrived, they changed the shape of marine predation. They were the Ichthyosaurs. Their name means fish lizards, though they were neither fish nor lizards. They were reptiles, descended from terrestrial ancestors that had, at some point, ventured into coastal waters and never returned. What makes Ichthyosaurs remarkable is not only their eventual size, but how completely they embraced the physics of the sea. When paleontologists first uncovered Ichthyosaur fossils in the early 19th century, the resemblance to modern dolphins was striking. Long, tapered snouts filled with teeth, large eye sockets, streamlined torsos, crescent-shaped tails in later forms. Yet this similarity was not due to shared ancestry. It was convergent evolution. Water demands efficiency. If you want to move quickly and continuously through it, your body must minimize drag. Over time, natural selection shaped ichthyosaurs into some of the most hydrodynamically refined vertebrates ever to exist. Early Triassic ichthyosaurs were more eel-like. Their bodies were elongated with less distinct tail fins, but evolution moved rapidly. By the Middle and Late Triassic, many species displayed a fusiform body shape, narrowing at both ends, with a well-defined dorsal fin and a powerful, crescent-shaped tail fluke supported by downward-bending vertebrae. This tail design is significant. Unlike early marine reptiles that relied more on limb-driven propulsion, derived ichthyosaurs used lateral tail beats as their primary thrust mechanism. The crescent tail fluke, similar in function to that of modern sharks and dolphins, allowed efficient high-speed cruising. Speed matters in open water. The ocean offers fewer hiding places than land. Prey cannot disappear behind trees or into burrows. Instead, survival depends on swimming ability. Predators must either outrun or outmaneuver their prey. Ichthyosaurs appear to have specialised in speed. Their forelimbs and hind limbs transformed into rigid flippers. The bones became tightly packed and flattened, forming hydrofoils that stabilised the body rather than generating primary propulsion. This freed the axial skeleton and tail to focus on thrust. Their vertebral columns were composed of numerous disc-like vertebrae, allowing controlled flexibility along the body's length. The musculature associated with this structure suggests strong lateral undulation, but perhaps the most astonishing feature of many ichthyosaurs was their eyes. Some species, such as Ophthalmosaurus, possessed enormous eye sockets relative to body size. In certain cases, the diameter of the eye itself approached 25 centimetres. For comparison, that is larger than a grapefruit. Large eyes collect more light. In dim environments, such as deeper waters or low-light conditions, this confers a major advantage. It suggests that at least some ichthyosaurs hunted at depth or during twilight hours. The deep sea in the Mesozoic was not identical to today's deep sea, but light still attenuated rapidly with depth. A predator capable of detecting faint movements in dim light could exploit prey inaccessible to others. Evidence from fossilised stomach contents and coprolites indicates that ichthyosaurs fed primarily on fish and cephalopods. Belemnites, squid-like animals with internal shells, appear frequently in association with ichthyosaur remains. Cephalopods are agile, intelligent prey. Hunting them requires speed and precision. The narrow, elongated snouts of many ichthyosaurs were lined with sharp, conical teeth, ideal for gripping slippery bodies. Not all ichthyosaurs were built the same. Some species developed robust skulls and broader jaws, suggesting a diet that may have included larger prey items. Others remained more slender and specialised for small, fast-moving animals. This diversification indicates that ichthyosaurs did not occupy a single ecological role. They filled multiple niches within marine food webs. From mid-level predators to apex hunters, size varied widely across the group. Early ichthyosaurs were modest in length, perhaps 2 to 4 metres. But as the Triassic progressed, some lineages achieved extraordinary dimensions. Shonisaurus, known from Nevada and British Columbia, is estimated to have reached lengths exceeding 15 metres, with some estimates pushing toward 20 metres. That places it in the same length category as modern large whales. The existence of such giants in the late Triassic is significant. It demonstrates that marine gigantism arose relatively early in the Mesozoic, not only in the Cretaceous with mosasaurs. Why did ichthyosaurs grow so large? The same principles discussed earlier apply. Buoyancy reduced mechanical constraints. Warm seas supported high productivity. Wide-ranging open oceans allowed extensive hunting grounds. But ichthyosaurs also benefited from timing. They emerged after the Permian extinction had cleared many marine niches. Competition from other large marine reptiles was initially limited. This allowed ichthyosaurs to expand rapidly into available roles. Over time, as other groups like plesiosaurs diversified, competition intensified. But by then, ichthyosaurs were already established and diversified. Another crucial adaptation was reproductive strategy. Unlike many reptiles, ichthyosaurs gave birth to live young in the water. Fossils from sites such as Holzmaden in Germany show pregnant females with embryos preserved inside the body cavity. This eliminated the need to return to land for egg-laying. Full aquatic reproduction is a profound evolutionary step. It frees a lineage from terrestrial constraints entirely. A predator that never needs to haul itself onto shore can optimize every aspect of its anatomy for aquatic life. Limbs can fully transform into paddles. Pelvic structures can reduce in size. Body shape can streamline without compromise. Live birth also suggests a degree of parental investment and developmental sophistication. Embryos likely developed within the mother's body until relatively advanced stages, increasing survival rates compared to vulnerable eggs. Higher juvenile survival feeds into population stability. Stable populations support long-term trends toward increased size. Ichthyosaurs also show evidence of rapid growth rates in some species. Bone histology studies indicate fast early growth, potentially allowing juveniles to reach safer sizes more quickly. Growth strategy matters in predator evolution. If young individuals can grow rapidly past vulnerable stages, more survive to adulthood, contributing to population resilience. Despite their success, ichthyosaurs were not invincible. The fossil record indicates that they declined in diversity during the early Cretaceous, disappearing entirely before the mass extinction at 66 million years ago. The reasons for their extinction are still debated. Shifts in ocean chemistry, changes in prey availability, competition with other marine reptiles, or a combination of factors may have contributed. But during their peak, they were among the most formidable predators in the ocean. Imagine a late Jurassic open sea. Schools of fish shimmer in the upper layers. Belemnites dart through mid-water. Far below, the water darkens toward the deep. From that darkness, a shape emerges, streamlined, silent except for the faint disturbance of water over skin. Large eyes scanning ahead, tail fluke beating in controlled arcs. An ichthyosaur accelerates. Its body, supported by buoyancy, carries immense momentum. Its jaws snap shut around a struggling cephalopod. Muscles contract, drawing prey inward. Within seconds, it resumes cruising. It is not alone in this sea. Plesiosaurs hunt differently nearby. Sharks patrol beneath. Competition is real. But for tens of millions of years, ichthyosaurs dominated many pelagic niches. Their hydrodynamic design represents one of the clearest examples of convergent evolution in the fossil record. They arrived at solutions that modern dolphins and sharks would later mirror. This convergence underscores the role of physics in shaping life. Water does not tolerate inefficiency. It sculpts bodies toward optimal forms. Ichthyosaurs were early masters of that sculpting. They demonstrated that reptiles could not only survive in open ocean, but thrive and grow to extraordinary sizes. They proved that marine gigantism was achievable under the right conditions, and in doing so, they paved the way for later marine reptile lineages to push size and power even further, refining different strategies within the same vast warm seas. If ichthyosaurs represented speed perfected, then plesiosaurs represented a different solution entirely. They did not rely primarily on tail-driven propulsion. They did not always favour narrow, pointed skulls built for streamlined pursuit. Instead, they explored another path within the same vast ocean, one that balanced stability, reach and control in a way that still puzzles paleontologists today. Plesiosaurs appeared in the fossil record during the late Triassic, and quickly diversified during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. At first glance, their body plan seems almost impractical. A broad, barrel-shaped torso, 4 large wing-like flippers, and in many species, a neck so long it appears exaggerated, sometimes composed of more than 70 vertebrae. It is tempting to look at a long-necked plesiosaur and assume that such a design would be slow or awkward. But that assumption comes from thinking in terrestrial terms. In water, different rules apply. The body of a plesiosaur was compact and dense, acting as a stable core. The 4 flippers were powerful and flexible, capable of coordinated strokes that resembled underwater flight. Unlike ichthyosaurs, which generated thrust primarily through tail beats, plesiosaurs appear to have relied on their flippers as the main source of propulsion. This distinction matters. Hydrodynamic modelling suggests that plesiosaurs used a lift-based propulsion system. Each flipper acted like a hydrofoil, generating lift as it moved through water at a slight angle. By coordinating strokes between front and rear flippers, they could produce thrust efficiently while maintaining precise control. Control is key when your head is extended far from your centre of mass. In long-necked plesiosaurs, the neck functioned as a flexible extension, allowing the head to move independently of the torso. Instead of turning the entire body to capture prey, a plesiosaur could sweep its neck laterally or upward, striking with minimal body disturbance. This may have reduced the hydrodynamic signature of an attack. In open water, prey are sensitive to pressure waves and water movement. A large body charging forward creates turbulence detectable by fish schools, but a long neck darting outward from a relatively steady body might create less warning. The neck itself was not likely highly flexible in every direction. While composed of many vertebrae, each joint allowed limited motion. Combined, however, they permitted a range of controlled movements. The skulls of long-necked plesiosaurs were typically small relative to body size, with slender jaws filled with sharp, interlocking teeth. This suggests a diet focused on fish and small cephalopods rather than heavily armoured prey. The long neck may have allowed them to insert their heads into fish schools, or manoeuvre through dense clusters of prey without committing the entire body. But not all plesiosaurs had long necks. Within the broader group, two major forms emerged: the long-necked plesiosauroids and the short-necked large-headed pleosauroids. The plesiosaurs, though technically within the larger plesiosaur clade, represented a shift toward brute force. They had shorter necks, massive skulls, and powerful jaws. Some species reached lengths of over 10 meters, with skulls exceeding 2 meters. Kronosaurus and Leopleurodon are among the most famous examples. Their bite force and jaw mechanics indicate the ability to tackle large prey, including other marine reptiles. This divergence within plesiosaurs illustrates an important principle. Once a body plan proves viable in a given environment, it can diversify into multiple strategies. The four-flipper propulsion system provided stability and maneuverability. From that foundation, evolution experimented with neck length and skull size. In warm, productive Mesozoic seas, there was room for both precision hunters and bone-crushing giants. The presence of both forms within the same time periods suggests that the food web was complex enough to support multiple apex or near-apex predators with different feeding strategies. Long-necked plesiosaurs may have specialized in smaller, agile prey. Pliosaurs may have occupied higher trophic levels, targeting larger fish, cephalopods, and possibly other marine reptiles. Competition between these forms would have been intense. As prey species evolved faster swimming capabilities or schooling behavior, predators had to adapt. Increased flipper efficiency and refined neck control may have been responses to this pressure. Buoyancy again played a central role. The broad torso of a plesiosaur, filled with lungs and internal organs, contributed to near-neutral buoyancy. Dense bones in some species may have acted as ballast, stabilizing the body in water. A stable platform is essential when using a long neck to strike. Excessive rolling or pitching would compromise accuracy. The four-flipper arrangement allowed for fine-tuned adjustments in pitch, roll, and yaw. By altering the stroke amplitude or timing between front and rear flippers, a plesiosaur could hover, ascend, or descend with precision. This ability to control position in the water column may have allowed long-necked species to stalk prey slowly before striking. The neck itself, while long, was not necessarily weak. The vertebrae were reinforced by overlapping processes and muscle attachments that maintained structural integrity. Some researchers have suggested that the neck functioned like a whip in rapid lateral strikes. Others argue that its movement was slower and more deliberate. Regardless of exact mechanics, the persistence of extreme neck elongation across millions of years indicates clear selective advantage. Consider the physics of reach. In water, distance can be closed quickly, but prey also reacts quickly. If a predator can extend its strike range without accelerating its entire mass, it may conserve energy and reduce detection. A long-necked plesiosaur could maintain a relatively steady body position, while probing into prey schools. The presence of gastroliths, stones swallowed and retained in the stomach, has been documented in some Plesiosaur fossils. The function of these stones is debated. They may have aided in digestion by grinding food. They may also have contributed to buoyancy control. Fine-tuned buoyancy control would enhance hunting precision. Pressure and depth likely influence Plesiosaur distribution. While many fossils are found in shallow marine deposits, some species may have ventured into deeper waters. Large pliosaurs, with their robust skulls and powerful jaws, appear to have been apex predators in certain ecosystems. Bite marks on bones of other marine reptiles and large fish suggest that plesiosaurs engaged in active predation on sizable prey. Their skull morphology indicates strong jaw muscles and significant bite force. Lever mechanics in their jaws favoured force over speed, allowing them to crush or grip struggling animals effectively. The coexistence of ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, pliosaurs and later mosasaurs in overlapping timeframes highlights the extraordinary productivity of the Mesozoic ocean. Multiple large predator lineages could persist simultaneously because the food web supported them. Warm seas, expansive coastlines, and high nutrient input created ecosystems dense enough to sustain varied predatory strategies. The flipper-based locomotion of plesiosaurs represents one of the most unique adaptations among marine vertebrates. Modern sea turtles use flippers for propulsion, but their movement differs in detail. Penguins use wing-like flippers underwater, yet no modern animal exactly replicates the plesiosaur's four-flipper system at that scale. Hydrodynamic modelling suggests that the coordination between front and rear flippers could have generated efficient thrust with reduced body oscillation compared to tail-driven swimmers. Reduced oscillation may minimise drag and energy expenditure over long distances. Energy efficiency supports larger body size. As with ichthyosaurs, reproductive strategy likely contributed to plesiosaur success. Evidence suggests that at least some plesiosaurs gave live birth. A remarkable fossil from Kansas shows a plesiosaur with a single large embryo inside its body cavity. This suggests that some species produced relatively few, well-developed offspring rather than large clutches of small young. Such a strategy parallels that of many modern large marine animals. Fewer offspring with greater parental investment can enhance survival rates in stable environments. Stable juvenile survival feeds into long-term size trends. Long-lived individuals with sustained growth can achieve impressive dimensions. In late Jurassic and Cretaceous seas, a large pliosaur patrolling an inland seaway would have encountered fish, ammonites, belemnites, and potentially rival predators. Its massive skull would have housed teeth capable of penetrating thick shells and bone. Its body, supported by buoyancy, would carry its weight effortlessly compared to any terrestrial predator of similar mass. Long-necked plesiosaurs nearby would pursue smaller prey with precision. Each represented a different expression of the same ecological opportunity. The Mesozoic ocean did not produce a single kind of giant. It produced a spectrum. Ichthyosaurs refined speed and endurance. Plesiosaurs refined control and reach. Plesiosaurs refined power and bite force. Together they illustrate how a rich, expansive food web can support diverse approaches to predation at enormous scales. And as the Cretaceous progressed, another lineage would enter this already competitive arena, bringing yet another variation on marine dominance, one that would rise rapidly and claim the apex in many regions before the age of reptiles in the sea came to an abrupt end. By the time mosasaurs entered the oceans, the seas were already crowded with experienced hunters. Ichthyosaurs had been refining open water speed for tens of millions of years. Plesiosaurs and pliosaurs had diversified into precision stalkers and skull-crushing powerhouses. The food web was dense. The habitats were vast, the competition was real, and yet, from the land, another lineage made the transition. Mosasaurs did not descend from earlier marine reptiles. They evolved from squamate reptiles, the group that today includes lizards and snakes. Their ancestors likely resembled large, semi-aquatic monitor lizards, prowling coastlines and estuaries during the early late Cretaceous. The move into the ocean did not happen all at once. Early mosasauroids show a mix of traits: limbs still capable of some terrestrial function, bodies less streamlined, tails not yet fully adapted for powerful propulsion. But once the transition began, it accelerated. Within a few million years, mosasaurs became fully marine. Limbs flattened into paddles, hips reduced, bodies elongated, tails developed a downward bend at the end of the vertebral column, supporting a crescent-shaped fluke similar in function to that of sharks and ichthyosaurs. The return to the sea was not a retreat, it was an expansion. Warm Cretaceous seas offered immense opportunity. High sea levels created vast inland waterways. The western interior seaway, stretching through what is now North America, became a major habitat for mosasaurs. The Tethys Ocean and other shallow basins provided additional territory. Unlike ichthyosaurs, which had long histories in marine systems, mosasaurs arrived relatively late in the Mesozoic. Their rise to dominance was rapid. This speed of diversification suggests that ecological space was available. Ichthyosaurs had declined by the mid-Cretaceous. Pliosaurs were less dominant than in earlier periods. The apex predator role in many regions was open. Mosasaurs filled it. Their body plan combined traits that made them formidable. They retained flexible skulls inherited from squamate ancestors. This flexibility allowed for a wide gape. Additional rows of teeth on the palate, known as pterygoid teeth, helped grip prey and move it toward the throat. The jaws could hinge widely, enabling the swallowing of the large prey items. Their teeth varied by species. Some had slender, sharp teeth for fish and squid. Others developed robust, crushing teeth for armoured prey like turtles or ammonites. This dietary flexibility supported diversification. Hydrodynamic studies suggest that mosasaurs used tail-driven propulsion similar to that of sharks. Early reconstructions depicted them as eel-like swimmers, relying heavily on full-body undulation. More recent fossil evidence, including preserved soft tissue impressions, indicates that many species had well-developed tail flukes. A crescent-shaped fluke increases propulsion efficiency at higher speeds. It indicates sustained cruising capability rather than slow ambush alone. Mosasaurs were not merely coastal scavengers. They were open water predators. Size varied widely within the group. Smaller mosasaurs measured a few meters in length. Larger species, such as Mosasaurus hoffmanni, reached lengths of up to 14 or 15 meters. Tylosaurus, another well-known genus, grew to comparable sizes. These were not minor predators. They were among the largest marine reptiles of their time. Their rise coincided with continued high sea levels and productive marine ecosystems. Fish populations were diverse and abundant. Cephalopods remained plentiful. Marine turtles, seabirds, and even other marine reptiles provided potential prey. Fossil evidence supports a wide diet. Stomach contents of some mosasaurs include fish, turtles, ammonites, and even smaller mosasaurs. Bite marks on bones of other marine reptiles suggest active predation rather than mere scavenging. Intragill predation appears to have been common. The late Cretaceous seas were competitive. Mosasaurs did not exist in isolation from other predators. Large sharks, including early lamniform species, shared the waters. Plesiosaurs persisted in some regions. Competition for prey likely drove rapid evolutionary refinement. One distinctive feature of mosasaurs was their cranial kinesis. The skull bones were loosely connected compared to those of many other reptiles. This allowed flexibility when capturing and swallowing prey. It may have enabled them to tackle larger animals relative to head size. Their necks were shorter than those of long-necked plesiosaurs but flexible. The torso was elongated. Limbs, though reduced in terrestrial function, were strong paddles that aided in manoeuvring. The tail was the main engine. Like ichthyosaurs, mosasaurs benefited from buoyancy. Their large bodies were supported by water, reducing skeletal stress. This allowed for significant size increase without the mechanical penalties faced by terrestrial predators, but they also carried over certain advantages from their terrestrial ancestry. squamates possess acute senses, particularly vision and smell. While direct evidence of sensory capability in mosasaurs is limited, their skull structure suggests well-developed sensory organs. The lateral line system, common in fish and some aquatic reptiles, may have evolved or been refined in mosasaurs to detect vibrations. Their teeth and jaw strength indicate active hunting rather than passive feeding. Rapid diversification within mosasaurs suggests that evolutionary experimentation was intense. Different species occupied slightly different niches. Some may have specialised in shallow coastal waters, others likely roamed open seas. The breakup of continents during the Cretaceous created complex marine geography. Inland seas, narrow straits, and broad continental shelves provided varied habitats. Mosasaurs appear in fossil records across Europe, North America, Africa, and other regions, indicating wide geographic distribution. Wide distribution supports resilience and sustained population growth. As apex predators, mosasaurs would have influenced entire ecosystems. Their presence likely shaped prey behaviour, schooling patterns, and habitat use. Large predators often structure marine communities by regulating mid-level predator populations. This cascading effect reinforces the importance of the food web. Mosasaurs grew large because the web beneath them was strong. The timing of their dominance is important. They rose during the late Cretaceous, a period characterised by high global temperatures and elevated sea levels. The climate was warm and relatively stable compared to earlier, more volatile intervals. Stable conditions over millions of years allow lineages to refine size and specialisation. Yet their reign was relatively brief in geological terms. When the mass extinction event at 66 million years ago struck, triggered by an asteroid impact and compounded by volcanic activity, marine ecosystems were devastated. Plankton populations collapsed, food chains fractured, large marine reptiles, including mosasaurs, disappeared. Their extinction underscores a central theme. Gigantism is fragile. It depends on sustained abundance. Remove the base of the food web and the apex cannot persist. But before that collapse, mosasaurs demonstrated that land predators could return to the sea and rapidly achieve dominance. Their transition illustrates the flexibility of evolutionary pathways. A lineage adapted for terrestrial life can, under the right environmental conditions, retool itself for open water. Warm seas, expansive coastlines, and abundant prey create opportunity. Mosasaurs seized that opportunity. Picture a late Cretaceous inland sea at sunset. The surface reflects orange light. Beneath, fish scatter in silver flashes. A large mosasaur glides through warm water. Its tail sweeps side to side in controlled arcs. Its body remains stable. Its jaws part slightly as it approaches a school of fish. In a sudden burst, it lunges. The school erupts outward, but momentum carries the predator through the centre. Teeth close around prey. Water churns briefly, then stills. This scene played out countless times over millions of years. Mosasaurs were not the first great marine hunters. Ichthyosaurs had preceded them. Plesiosaurs had carved their own niches. But mosasaurs represented the last great chapter of reptilian dominance in the Mesozoic oceans. Their rise from terrestrial ancestry to marine apex status highlights the combination of physics, climate, geography, and food web strength that defined that era. And as the late Cretaceous continued, sharks and other predators shared these waters, adding further complexity to an already intense arms race beneath the surface. Long before the name Megalodon entered documentaries and museum exhibits, before giant serrated teeth were lifted from coastal sediments and placed under glass, sharks were already veterans of the sea. They did not arrive in the Mesozoic as newcomers. Their lineage stretches back more than 400 million years, long before the first dinosaur stepped onto land. By the time marine reptiles began to dominate the oceans, sharks had already survived multiple mass extinctions and reshaped themselves many times. When we think of prehistoric sharks, it is easy to skip straight to the enormous Miocene predator that would come much later. But during the Mesozoic, sharks were not minor background players. They were active participants in the same food web that supported Ichthyosaurs, Plesiosaurs and mosasaurs. The difference was scale and role. Early Mesozoic sharks were generally smaller than the largest marine reptiles, but they were diverse and adaptable. Their skeletons were made of cartilage rather than bone, which rarely fossilises well. As a result, much of what we know comes from their teeth, which fossilise in great numbers. Teeth tell stories. Shark teeth vary in shape depending on diet. Some are long and needle-like, ideal for gripping fish. Others are broader and flatter, suited for crushing shelled prey. Serrations along edges indicate slicing capability. In Triassic and Jurassic deposits, shark teeth show considerable variety. This suggests that sharks occupied multiple trophic levels, from small fish eaters to larger predators capable of tackling substantial prey. One notable group during the Jurassic and Cretaceous was the hybodonts. These sharks had distinctive dorsal spines and heterodont dentition, meaning they possessed different types of teeth in different parts of the jaw. This implies dietary flexibility. Dietary flexibility is a powerful evolutionary advantage. While marine reptiles often specialised in certain prey types, sharks could adapt more quickly to changing conditions. Their reproductive strategies, growth rates, and mobility allowed them to exploit niches rapidly. In the Mesozoic seas, sharks shared space with enormous marine reptiles. They were not at the very top of the food chain in most cases, but they were persistent. Persistence matters over geological time. Consider the late Jurassic Ocean. Ichthyosaurs cruise open waters. Pliosaurs patrol as apex predators. Beneath and around them swim sharks of various sizes, feeding on fish, cephalopods, and perhaps the remains of larger kills. Sharks do not need to dominate the top to thrive. They can operate efficiently at mid to high trophic levels, taking advantage of abundant prey. The hydrodynamic design of sharks had already been refined long before the Mesozoic. Their streamlined bodies, lateral line systems, and electroreceptive organs allowed precise detection of prey. Their cartilage skeletons made them lighter and more flexible than bony fish. Flexibility in body structure can translate to maneuverability. Many Mesozoic sharks likely relied on rapid acceleration to capture prey. Some may have scavenged carcasses of marine reptiles, contributing to nutrient recycling within ecosystems. Scavenging is often overlooked in discussions of prehistoric oceans, but it is a critical component of food webs. When a large marine reptile died, its body would sink and become a temporary feast for sharks and other predators. Such events concentrated energy briefly in one place, supporting multiple species. As the Cretaceous progressed, new shark lineages emerged. Lamniform sharks, the group that includes modern great whites and makos, began to diversify. Early members of this group show teeth designed for slicing flesh. This indicates a shift toward more active predation on larger prey. By the late Cretaceous, sharks were increasingly formidable. Some species grew to several meters in length. While not matching the size of the largest mosasaurs, they were significant predators in their own right. Fossil evidence from sites like the Western Interior Seaway reveals abundant shark teeth alongside mosasaur and plesiosaur remains. Bite marks on bones sometimes suggest shark feeding, though distinguishing scavenging from active predation can be difficult. The coexistence of sharks and large marine reptiles illustrates the strength of the Mesozoic food web. Multiple large predator lineages could persist because the underlying energy base was robust. Unlike marine reptiles, sharks had certain physiological advantages. Their cartilage skeletons reduced mineral requirements compared to fully ossified bone. This may have lowered metabolic costs associated with growth and maintenance. Sharks also possess continuous tooth replacement. Rows of developing teeth sit behind the functional row, ready to move forward when teeth are lost. In a predatory lifestyle where teeth frequently break or wear down, this is invaluable. Marine reptiles also replace teeth, but the efficiency and frequency of shark tooth replacement are exceptional. Reproductive strategies among Mesozoic sharks likely varied, as they do today. Some species may have laid eggs, others likely gave live birth. Viviparity allows for fewer, more developed offspring, increasing survival rates in competitive environments. This reproductive flexibility enhances resilience. While marine reptiles often dominated apex niches, sharks were rarely excluded entirely. Their ecological versatility allowed them to persist through fluctuations. When ichthyosaurs declined in the early Cretaceous, sharks remained. When pliosaurs diminished, sharks remained. When mosasaurs rose, sharks remained. Their role may not have been to surpass marine reptiles in size during the Mesozoic, but to operate alongside them. The absence of megalodon during this era is notable. That massive shark would not appear until millions of years after the extinction of non-avian dinosaurs and marine reptiles. Why did sharks not reach megalodon scale during the Mesozoic? Several factors may explain this. First, the apex predator niches in many regions were occupied by large marine reptiles. Competition at the very top was intense. Second, the physiology of sharks, while efficient, differs from that of marine reptiles and mammals. Growth rates, metabolic demands, and life history traits influence maximum size. Third, ecological balance may not have favoured a shark larger than the dominant marine reptiles at the time. But sharks were not insignificant. Their teeth, scattered in sedimentary layers worldwide, testify to their abundance. They were integral to energy transfer within marine systems. Picture a late Cretaceous inland sea again. A mosasaur lunges at a large fish. The fish escapes, injured. Blood disperses in water. Within moments, smaller sharks converge, drawn by chemical cues. Their electroreceptors detect faint signals. Their bodies accelerate with sudden bursts of speed. They feed quickly. Later, when a marine reptile carcass sinks to the seafloor, sharks may arrive in waves, tearing flesh and stripping bone. This dynamic reinforces the interconnectedness of the food web. Sharks may not have built the largest predators of the Mesozoic, but they helped sustain the system that allowed those predators to exist. They removed injured and weak individuals, they recycled nutrients, they competed for prey, and they endured. When the asteroid struck at the end of the Cretaceous, marine ecosystems collapsed. Plankton populations were devastated. Large marine reptiles vanished. Sharks, however, survived. Their smaller average size, flexible diets, and diverse reproductive strategies likely contributed to their survival. While many shark lineages went extinct, enough persisted to repopulate oceans in the Paleogene. In the absence of marine reptiles, new ecological opportunities opened. Over tens of millions of years, lamniform sharks would increase in size. Eventually, Megalodon would rise as one of the largest predatory sharks in history. But that story belongs to a different era. During the Mesozoic, sharks were the steady presence beneath the giants. They adapted, diversified, and endured in seas shaped by warm climates and expansive coastlines. They remind us that gigantism is not the only path to success. While marine reptiles pushed size to extraordinary extremes, sharks refined efficiency, resilience, and persistence. And within that competitive, layered world of the Mesozoic ocean, even as reptilian giants dominated the surface and mid-water, the silent silhouettes of sharks moved below, waiting, feeding, surviving. If you remove the prey, the giants disappear. It sounds obvious, almost too simple. But when we picture the Mesozoic oceans, it is easy to focus on the dramatic silhouettes of mosasaurs, the immense skulls of pliosaurs, the streamlined bodies of ichthyosaurs. What we do not picture as often are the millions upon millions of smaller creatures that made their existence possible. Among the most important of these were ammonites and belemnites. They did not roar. They did not chase. They did not leave behind skeletons that dominate museum halls. But without them, the largest predators in history would have had nothing substantial to eat. Ammonites were cephalopods, related to modern squids, octopuses, and nautiluses. Unlike most modern cephalopods, however, they carried external shells, often coiled into elegant spirals. Some shells were small enough to fit in a palm. Others reached more than a metre in diameter. Their shells were divided into chambers separated by walls called septa. The animal lived in the outermost chamber, while the inner chambers were filled with gas and fluid. By adjusting the balance of gas and liquid within these chambers, ammonites could control their buoyancy. Buoyancy control is not trivial. It allows an organism to hover at a particular depth without constant swimming. It reduces energy expenditure. It creates stability in the water column. Ammonites thrived throughout the Mesozoic. They were incredibly diverse, with thousands of species evolving over nearly 300 million years. During the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods in particular, they became abundant components of marine ecosystems. Abundance is what matters here. Ammonites reproduced rapidly and in large numbers. Like many modern cephalopods, they likely produced numerous offspring, with only a fraction surviving to adulthood. This high reproductive output ensured constant replenishment of populations despite heavy predation. Their shells offered some protection, but not enough against the largest marine predators. Fossil evidence frequently shows bite marks on ammonite shells. Some shells bear punctures or crushing damage consistent with powerful jaws. In some cases, healed injuries indicate that ammonites survived attacks, suggesting that predation pressure was intense and frequent. Belemnites, on the other hand, resembled modern squids more closely. They had elongated, torpedo-shaped bodies and internal shells called rostra. These rostra fossilize readily and are common in marine sedimentary deposits. Unlike ammonites, belemnites did not carry large external shells. This likely made them faster and more agile. They were active swimmers, capable of rapid jet propulsion by expelling water through a siphon. In a Mesozoic sea filled with predators, speed is survival. Belemnites likely formed schools similar to modern squid. Schooling behaviour confuses predators and reduces individual risk, but it also creates dense packets of energy in the water. A single belemnite may not represent a substantial meal for a 10-metre predator. A school of hundreds does. Ichthyosaurs in particular appear to have relied heavily on cephalopods like belemnites. Fossilised stomach contents from Ichthyosaur specimens often contain belemnite hooks and rostra, preserved in clusters within the abdominal cavity. These remains provide direct evidence of diet. Large eyes in some ichthyosaurs suggest that they hunted belemnites at depth or during low-light conditions. Belemnites, being active swimmers, may have occupied mid-water zones where light levels were lower than at the surface. Predators capable of detecting and capturing them in dim conditions would have had an advantage. Ammonites occupied slightly different ecological niches. Some likely drifted more passively. Others may have been more active swimmers. Their shells created drag, limiting speed compared to shellless cephalopods. This drag made them vulnerable. But vulnerability does not mean weakness in ecological terms. Ammonites succeeded precisely because they produced enormous numbers of offspring and diversified rapidly. Shell morphology varied widely. Some shells were tightly coiled, others were loosely coiled or even uncoiled in later forms. Some species developed spines or ribbing on shells, possibly as deterrents to predators. Spines may have made shells harder to swallow or crush. Ribbing could have strengthened shell structure. These features suggest evolutionary responses to predation pressure. Predators and prey shape each other. As pliosaurs developed stronger bite forces, ammonites may have evolved thicker shells. As ammonites became more abundant, predators specializing in shell crushing may have gained advantage. The energy content of ammonites and belemnites would have been significant. Cephalopod tissue is rich in protein. A large pliosaur or mosasaur consuming multiple ammonites or squid-like belemnites could accumulate substantial caloric intake. Energy density at mid-level trophic layers is what supports top predators. fish also played a major role. Teleost fish diversified dramatically during the Mesozoic. They developed advanced jaw mechanisms that allowed greater suction feeding efficiency. This innovation increased their success and abundance. Large schools of fish moving through shallow seas would have been primary targets for ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs. But fish alone may not have supported the highest trophic levels. Cephalopods often grow rapidly and reproduce in large numbers. Their life cycles may have been relatively short, creating fast turnover. Rapid turnover at mid-level trophic positions fuels consistent energy flow upward. Imagine a late Cretaceous inland sea again. Near the surface, small fish dart in shimmering schools. Below them, belemnites pulse through the water in coordinated groups. Ammonites drift at various depths, adjusting buoyancy with subtle internal shifts. This is not empty blue space. It is layered with life. Now introduce a large predator. A mosasaur detects a school of fish and accelerates. Nearby, a pliosaur targets a large ammonite. In deeper water, an Ichthyosaur hunts belemnites using keen eyesight. Each predator depends on a steady stream of prey. If ammonite populations collapsed regionally, predators specializing in them would struggle. If belemnites declined, ichthyosaurs would need alternative prey. The persistence of marine gigantism over tens of millions of years implies that prey populations remain strong and resilient. Ammonites in particular are used today as index fossils because of their rapid evolution and wide distribution. Their shells are found in marine sediments across the globe. This global presence indicates that they were not isolated local species but widespread components of Mesozoic oceans. Widespread prey distribution supports wide predator distribution. Belemnite rostra are so abundant in some deposits that they form concentrated layers. Such density suggests massive populations. High prey density reduces search time for predators. Reduced search time improves energy efficiency. In ecological terms, predators balance energy gained from food against energy spent locating and capturing it. When prey are abundant and densely distributed, large predators can maintain positive energy budgets even with high metabolic demands. Shell-crushing adaptations in predators provide further evidence of the importance of ammonites. Certain pliosaurs had broad, robust teeth capable of exerting substantial force. Bite marks on ammonite shells align with tooth spacing in some species. Mosasaurs also show dental variation. Some species developed crushing teeth suited for hard-shelled prey. Others retained sharp, piercing teeth for softer-bodied animals. Dietary specialization reduces direct competition among predators. If one mosasaur species focuses on fish while another crushes ammonites, both can coexist more easily. Diversity at prey levels allows diversity at predator levels. It is also worth noting that ammonites and belemnites themselves fed on smaller organisms, including plankton and small crustaceans. They acted as intermediaries, converting lower trophic energy into larger, more accessible biomass. This conversion is critical. Plankton are too small for large predators to consume directly in most cases. Without intermediate consumers like cephalopods and fish, energy would remain trapped at low trophic levels. The efficiency of energy transfer from plankton to cephalopods to marine reptiles underpinned gigantism. At the end of the Cretaceous, when the asteroid impact disrupted plankton communities, ammonites and belemnites went extinct. Their disappearance was rapid and total. Marine reptiles vanished as well. This sequence highlights their interdependence. Remove the base and middle of the food web, and the apex collapses. The giants of the Mesozoic were not sustained by isolated miracles of evolution. They were supported by vast layered networks of organisms, many small and easily overlooked. Ammonites and belemnites may not inspire the same awe as a 15-meter mosasaur, but they were indispensable. Without their constant reproduction, their abundance and their position in the food web, the energy required to build and maintain massive predators would not have existed. In that sense, the true architects of marine gigantism were not only the hunters at the top, but the countless shelled and soft-bodied creatures moving quietly below them. And as the food web thickened and diversified, the pressure on predators to refine their strategies intensified, pushing evolution toward ever more specialized and extreme forms within the open water. On land, there are walls. Forests block movement. Mountains redirect migration. Rivers cut territories in two. Even open plains are interrupted by terrain, vegetation, and changing climates over relatively short distances. In open water, those walls are mostly gone. The ocean during the Mesozoic was not empty, but it was continuous. It stretched for thousands of kilometers with no cliffs, no deserts, no physical barriers that forced animals into tight boundaries. That continuity changes how evolution works. When a species lives in open water, it is not constrained by narrow corridors. It can expand across entire basins if it has the capacity to swim and feed effectively. If a trait offers even a slight advantage in hunting or survival, it can spread rapidly through populations that are widely connected. And in a system like that, small advantages accumulate. Open water rewards extremes because it magnifies both success and failure. In a reef or a coastal marsh, hiding places are abundant. A smaller predator can ambush prey from behind rocks or vegetation. A slower swimmer might survive by exploiting cover. In open pelagic zones, concealment is limited. Prey rely on schooling and speed. Predators rely on speed, endurance, sensory precision, or overwhelming force. This pushes traits outward. If you're slightly faster than your competitor, you catch more prey. If you're slightly larger, you may access prey sizes unavailable to smaller predators. If your bite force is marginally stronger, you can exploit harder-shelled organisms. Over millions of years, these slight differences become substantial. Consider swimming speed. In open water, prey fish often form schools. Schooling reduces individual risk but increases collective visibility. To penetrate a school and successfully capture prey, a predator must either accelerate rapidly or coordinate movement with precision. For ichthyosaurs, streamlined bodies and crescent tail flukes increased cruising efficiency and top speed. For some pliosaurs, powerful necks and jaws allowed rapid strikes. For mosasaurs, flexible skulls and strong tails provided a combination of reach and propulsion. Speed in water depends not only on muscle strength but on minimizing drag. Drag increases with the square of velocity, so doubling speed requires significantly more power. A body optimized for low drag gains disproportionate advantage. Natural selection in open water relentlessly penalizes inefficient shapes. This is why unrelated lineages converge on similar hydrodynamic forms. Sharks, ichthyosaurs, dolphins, and tuna all exhibit fusiform bodies with tapered ends and stabilizing fins. The ocean rewards streamlining. Size also scales differently in open water. On land, large size can be a liability if it reduces maneuverability in complex terrain. In the ocean, maneuverability still matters, but three-dimensional space allows alternative strategies. A large predator can occupy mid-water zones inaccessible to strictly benthic or surface-oriented species. It can dive deeply, rise rapidly, and travel long distances. Range expands with capability. In open water, where prey distribution can shift with currents and seasons, the ability to cover distance is critical. Larger animals often possess greater energy reserves and more efficient long-distance travel per unit mass. Efficiency in locomotion supports endurance. Endurance supports migration. Migration supports exploitation of seasonal or regional productivity peaks. The Mesozoic ocean, with its warm temperatures and extensive shallow seas, likely experienced periodic plankton blooms in different regions. Predators capable of following these pulses would gain advantage. Open water also sharpens sensory evolution. In environments where visual range may extend for tens of meters in clear conditions, and where prey movement creates pressure waves detectable across distance, sensory acuity becomes vital. Large eyes in Ichthyosaur suggest adaptation to low-light hunting. The lateral line system, sensitive to vibrations, would have been crucial for detecting movement. Chemical detection of blood or injured prey in water can attract predators from considerable distances. In such an environment, being slightly more sensitive can mean more successful hunts. But extremes are not only about speed and size, they're also about specialization. In a rich layered food web, niches proliferate. Some predators may specialize in shell crushing, others in deep diving, others in high-speed pursuit. Specialization reduces direct competition, but increases dependence on specific prey types. In open water, where niches are defined more by depth and prey behavior than by physical barriers, specialization can push traits to remarkable levels. Pliosaurs evolved skulls of enormous size relative to body length, with jaws capable of exerting tremendous force. This specialization likely targeted large resistant prey. Long-necked plesiosaurs developed extreme cervical elongation, allowing reach without full-body acceleration. Mosasaurs diversified into multiple feeding strategies within a relatively short evolutionary window. These extremes arise because the open ocean does not moderate traits the way more constrained habitats sometimes do. On land, a predator that grows too large may struggle with food scarcity and drought conditions. It may be unable to navigate forested terrain. It may face seasonal resource limitations. In the Mesozoic ocean, prolonged warmth and high productivity reduced some of these constraints. Energy availability remained relatively stable over long periods. Prey diversity buffered against single resource collapse. When constraints loosen, selection can push traits further. Open water also amplifies predator-prey arms races. In enclosed or structurally complex habitats, prey can evolve behaviors that rely on environment, such as hiding in crevices. In open water, defense often centers on speed, schooling, or morphological deterrents like spines or thicker shells. Ammonites developed varied shell shapes and ornamentation. Fish evolved faster swimming capabilities. Cephalopods likely enhanced jet propulsion efficiency. Predators responded with greater speed, stronger jaws, and improved maneuverability. This reciprocal escalation is intensified in environments where physical escape routes are limited. If a prey species increases average size slightly, predators may follow to maintain hunting efficiency. If predators grow larger, prey may increase size or speed to compensate. In this way, open water becomes an arena of continuous adjustment. There is also the matter of population size and genetic diversity. In expansive, connected oceans, populations can be large and widely distributed. Large population size increases genetic variation. Greater variation provides more raw material for natural selection. With more variation, selection can explore more extreme phenotypes. Over millions of years, this exploration can produce dramatic results. Open water ecosystems also tend to support layered vertical structure. Different species occupy different depths based on temperature, pressure tolerance, and prey availability. Predators that can exploit multiple layers gain advantage. Deep diving capability may require physiological adaptations such as enhanced oxygen storage or pressure tolerance. These adaptations can correlate with size increases. Larger bodies can store more oxygen in absolute terms, supporting longer dives. Pressure resistance scales with structural reinforcement. Some large marine reptiles may have possessed skeletal and soft tissue adaptations that allow deeper forays. The ability to access deep prey expands resource base. Open water rewards flexibility in spatial use. Another dimension is risk. In environments with fewer physical refuges, mortality risk may be higher for smaller individuals. Growing quickly to a larger size can reduce vulnerability. This creates selective pressure for rapid juvenile growth and potentially larger adult size. Fossil evidence from bone histology suggests that some marine reptiles grew quickly during early life stages. If juveniles can outgrow the size range of common predators quickly, survival rates improve. Open water also influences social behaviour. While evidence for complex social structures in marine reptiles is limited, schooling among fish and cephalopods would have shaped predator tactics. Large predators may have operated solitarily or in loose aggregations. Coordination at scale is difficult to infer from fossils, but open water allows group movement over large areas. Even without coordinated hunting, multiple predators in the same region intensify competition. Competition drives extremes. When several large predators coexist, each must refine its strategy. Some may grow larger to dominate prey access, others may specialize to avoid direct competition. In such an environment, moderate traits may be outcompeted by more efficient or more powerful variants. Open water rarely rewards mediocrity at the top. It is not that mid-sized predators cannot exist. They do and did. But the ecological ceiling for size is higher when constraints are fewer. The Mesozoic ocean provided that elevated ceiling. Warm temperatures, high productivity, expansive geography, and connected habitats reduced many limiting factors. Within this permissive system, natural selection amplified advantageous traits relentlessly. Speed became faster, jaws became stronger, bodies became larger, and once large size conferred dominance in a given region, it could persist for millions of years, reinforced by consistent ecological structure. Evolution in open water is not gentle, it is efficient. It tests forms against the fluid resistance of water and the relentless demands of energy balance. Those forms that meet the demands survive and spread. Those that fall short vanish. Over nearly 186 million years, this process built marine reptiles that still seem improbable in scale. They were not accidents, they were outcomes. Outcomes of physics, climate, geography, food webs, and the peculiar dynamics of life in a world without walls. And as the Mesozoic progressed toward its final chapters, the escalation between predators would intensify further, sharpening the arms race that defined the upper levels of the ocean's hierarchy. Size in the ocean is not decoration. It is a decision written into biology over millions of years. When a lineage trends toward larger average body mass, it is not because evolution favours spectacle. It is because, under the conditions at hand, being bigger confers consistent advantages that outweigh the costs. In the Mesozoic oceans, those advantages aligned repeatedly. Bigger can mean safer. Predation does not stop at the top. Even large marine reptiles were vulnerable when young. A juvenile Ichthyosaur, only a metre or two long, could easily become prey for larger predators. A young mosasaur, not yet at full size, faced threats from sharks, pliosaurs, and even adult members of its own species. Growing quickly toward large adult size reduced that vulnerability window. In ecological terms, there is often a threshold size beyond which predation risk drops sharply. Once a predator surpasses the size range of most threats, it becomes relatively safe from attack. This creates selective pressure for rapid early growth and potentially larger ultimate size. Bone histology studies in some marine reptiles suggest accelerated growth rates during juvenile stages. Fast growth allows individuals to reach safer sizes more quickly. Once large enough, few animals in the same ecosystem can threaten you directly. In late Cretaceous seas, a fully grown 15-metre mosasaur likely had no consistent natural predators. It may have faced competition and occasional aggressive encounters, but systematic predation would have been rare. Safety allows longevity. Longevity allows extended reproductive output. Extended reproductive output supports the persistence of large body size in a population. But safety is only part of the story. Bigger can also mean faster, at least in certain contexts. This may seem counterintuitive. Larger animals have greater mass and thus greater inertia. Accelerating that mass requires more force. Yet in water, propulsion efficiency can increase with size under specific conditions. Larger animals can generate more absolute muscle power. They also tend to have lower mass-specific metabolic cost for sustained movement. The energy required per kilogram to travel a given distance often decreases as body size increases. For sustained cruising, this can translate into greater range at comparable or even lower relative energy cost. Consider a large Ichthyosaur cruising across an open basin. Its streamlined body reduces drag. Its powerful tail fluke converts muscular energy into forward thrust efficiently. A smaller predator may accelerate more quickly over short distances, but the larger animal can maintain speed over longer intervals without exhausting itself. Endurance matters in open water. Prey may migrate across hundreds of kilometers following plankton blooms or temperature gradients. A predator capable of matching that migration without prohibitive energy expenditure gains consistent access to food. Bigger bodies also store more energy. Fat reserves, muscle mass, and glycogen stores scale with body size. Larger predators can survive longer between meals. In ecosystems where prey distribution fluctuates regionally or seasonally, this buffering capacity is valuable. If a local prey population declines temporarily, a large predator with substantial energy reserves can travel farther or endure scarcity longer than a smaller competitor. This increases resilience. Now consider hunger. Bigger animals require more absolute energy intake. A 15-meter mosasaur must consume significantly more biomass than a 5-meter one. This creates pressure. To support large body size, prey capture efficiency must be high. Prey availability must be consistent. In the Mesozoic oceans, these conditions were often met. When food webs are strong and prey are abundant, larger predators can capitalize on high-calorie prey items that smaller predators cannot subdue. A pliosaur with a 2-meter skull and crushing teeth could target large armored prey. A smaller predator would be unable to exploit that resource effectively. By accessing larger prey, big predators may reduce competition with smaller ones. Resource partitioning stabilizes ecosystems. Gigantism can therefore function as a competitive strategy. By moving into a prey size category inaccessible to others, a lineage reduces direct competition. This shift also influences prey evolution. If predators begin targeting larger prey consistently, prey species may respond by increasing size themselves or by altering behavior. Over time, this escalation can raise average body sizes across multiple trophic levels. In Mesozoic marine ecosystems, evidence suggests that prey diversity and size range were broad. Ammonites varied from small to massive. Fish range from modest schooling species to larger predatory forms. Marine turtles and other reptiles provided additional biomass. The presence of large prey supports the evolution of large predators, but gigantism carries risks. Larger bodies take longer to mature. Gestational development periods may be extended. Fewer offspring may be produced per reproductive cycle. This makes large species more vulnerable to rapid environmental changes. Yet during stable, warm Mesozoic intervals, environmental conditions may have remained predictable enough to favour long-lived, slow-maturing giants. In open water, detection and intimidation also play roles. A massive predator may deter potential rivals simply by size alone. Visual signals in water are limited by clarity, but a large silhouette can influence interactions. Intraspecific competition among marine reptiles likely included displays and physical confrontations. Larger individuals would have advantages in such encounters. Dominance hierarchies in large predators may influence access to prime hunting grounds or mating opportunities. Being bigger can therefore enhance reproductive success indirectly. There is also a thermodynamic component. Larger animals maintain more stable internal temperatures due to lower surface area to volume ratios. In warm Mesozoic seas, this would have reduced heat loss and supported sustained activity. Stable internal temperature supports consistent muscle performance. Consistent muscle performance supports effective hunting. In deeper or cooler waters, this advantage becomes even more pronounced. Some ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs may have ventured into deeper zones in search of prey. Larger body size would have reduced the energetic cost of maintaining function in cooler water layers. Now consider biomechanics. Jaw mechanics scale with skull size. A larger skull accommodates larger jaw muscles. Greater muscle cross-sectional area increases bite force. Pliosaurs exemplify this. With enormous skulls and reinforced jaw joints, they could exert tremendous force. This allowed them to crush large ammonites or seize sizable marine reptiles. A smaller predator lacking such bite force would be limited to softer or smaller prey. By growing larger, a lineage can cross mechanical thresholds. The same applies to swimming performance. Muscle mass increases with body size. While mass increases faster than muscle cross-section in simple scaling models, evolutionary modifications can adjust proportions. Tail musculature in large mosasaurs and ichthyosaurs suggests significant thrust capacity. Large tail flukes increase surface area for thrust generation. When powered by strong muscles, they convert energy into forward motion effectively. This enables bursts of speed sufficient to capture agile prey. The ocean also changes the relationship between size and injury risk. On land, a fall or misstep by a massive animal can cause serious skeletal damage. In water, buoyancy cushions movement. There are fewer hard surfaces to collide with at speed. Reduced injury risk may contribute to longer average lifespans. Longer lifespans support larger ultimate size, particularly in species with indeterminate growth patterns. The fossil record indicates that some marine reptiles continued growing throughout life. If growth is slow but continuous, extended lifespan results in significant size increase. Gigantism can also influence digestive efficiency. Larger digestive tracts can process substantial meals over longer periods. If a large predator captures a sizable prey item, it can derive energy over extended digestion without immediate need for additional hunting. This reduces hunting frequency and exposure to potential injury during capture events. Yet gigantism demands stability. The end of the Cretaceous demonstrates this clearly. When plankton populations collapsed following the asteroid impact and associated environmental upheaval, food chains disintegrated. Large marine reptiles dependent on robust prey networks vanished. Smaller, more flexible predators such as some sharks survived more readily. Gigantism is therefore strategic under specific conditions, but fragile when those conditions shift abruptly. During the height of the Mesozoic, however, conditions favoured it repeatedly. Warm seas, expansive coastlines, high productivity, and layered food webs created a system where being bigger meant reduced predation risk, enhanced prey access, improved endurance, and competitive dominance. Imagine again the late Cretaceous inland sea. A large mosasaur glides beneath the surface. Smaller fish scatter at its approach. A mid-sized predator alters course to avoid confrontation. The giant does not need to accelerate immediately. It patrols steadily, confident in its place within the hierarchy. Its size reduces threat. Its power increases opportunity. Its hunger drives efficiency. Gigantism here is not excess. It is adaptation. And as multiple large predators coexisted within these seas, each refining its own strategy, the ocean became an arena not only of size but of escalating competition, sharpening every advantage available beneath the surface. Temperature governs chemistry. Chemistry governs metabolism. Metabolism governs movement, growth, and survival. In the Mesozoic oceans, temperature was not a minor background detail. It was one of the central forces shaping what bodies could do and how large they could become. For long stretches of the Mesozoic era, global temperatures were significantly warmer than today. There were no permanent polar ice caps during much of the Triassic, Jurassic, and large portions of the Cretaceous. Sea surface temperatures were elevated across broad latitudes. Even higher latitude waters were milder than their modern equivalents. Warm water changes biological math. In ectothermic animals, body temperature largely follows environmental temperature. Warmer surroundings increase enzymatic reaction rates within cells. Muscle contraction speeds up. Digestion proceeds faster, Growth can accelerate. Marine reptiles were reptiles, but they were not necessarily identical in physiology to modern cold-blooded lizards. Isotopic analyses of Ichthyosaur and Plesiosaur bones suggest that some species maintained body temperatures higher than surrounding water. This indicates some form of elevated metabolic rate, whether through regional endothermy, high activity levels, or insulation mechanisms not fully preserved in fossils. Regardless of exact mechanism, warm seas reduce the metabolic cost of staying active. On land, a large ectothermic predator in a cool environment may be sluggish. In warm marine water, that same predator can sustain higher levels of activity without expending energy to generate heat internally. This matters for hunting. A predator that can remain active for longer periods without overheating or exhausting itself has a consistent advantage. Warm water also reduces the thermal gradient between body and environment. Heat loss occurs more slowly when the difference between internal and external temperature is smaller. For large-bodied animals with lower surface area to volume ratios, heat retention becomes even more efficient. This combination supports stable internal conditions. Stability supports performance. Now consider metabolic scaling. Metabolic rate does not increase linearly with body mass. Larger animals generally have lower mass-specific metabolic rates. That means each kilogram of tissue in a large animal consumes less energy per unit time than a kilogram in a smaller animal. In warm marine environments, where maintaining body temperature requires less effort, the balance between energy intake and energy expenditure becomes favourable for larger bodies. If prey is abundant, and if movement through water is energetically efficient at scale, then large size becomes sustainable. Warm climates during the Mesozoic were not uniform at all times, but over millions of years, the general pattern favoured reduced temperature extremes compared to modern Earth. Reduced extremes mean fewer seasonal crashes in productivity in many regions. Availability interacts closely with temperature. Warm water holds less dissolved oxygen than cold water, but ocean circulation redistributes oxygen-rich surface water into deeper layers. During productive periods, photosynthesis by phytoplankton generates significant oxygen in surface waters. Large marine reptiles likely had respiratory systems adapted to maximize oxygen uptake. Large lungs, efficient circulation, and possibly high blood volumes would support active lifestyles. If some species maintained elevated body temperatures relative to ambient water, they may have achieved metabolic rates closer to modern marine mammals than to typical reptiles. Higher metabolic rate supports sustained swimming, rapid growth, and complex predatory behaviour. But elevated metabolism also increases energy demand. This is where the marine advantage becomes clear. In open water with high productivity, the energy supply was sufficient to meet these demands. Consider the relationship between temperature and digestion. Warmer body temperatures accelerate digestive enzyme activity. Faster digestion allows more frequent feeding. More frequent feeding supports faster growth. In environments where prey is abundant, this creates a feedback loop. Warm water supports high activity. High activity allows effective hunting. Effective hunting provides abundant energy. Abundant energy supports growth. Larger size enhances hunting success further. Temperature also influences distribution. In a warm global climate, suitable habitat extends across wider latitudes. Marine reptiles could inhabit regions that would be too cold under modern conditions. Fossils of marine reptiles have been found in areas that are now near polar regions. This suggests that either ocean temperatures were warm enough to support them, or that they possessed physiological adaptations allowing function in cooler waters. Large body size assists with thermal inertia. Thermal inertia refers to the tendency of large bodies to resist rapid temperature changes. A massive marine reptile would cool more slowly in slightly cooler waters compared to a small one. This allows temporary forays into different thermal zones without immediate physiological stress. Such flexibility increases available hunting grounds. Another factor is the effect of temperature on growth rates at lower trophic levels. Phytoplankton productivity is influenced by light and nutrients, but also by temperature. Warmer waters can accelerate growth rates of primary producers, provided nutrients are available. Zooplankton and fish likewise grow faster in warm conditions up to a point. Faster growth at lower trophic levels means more rapid biomass accumulation. This supports larger predator populations. In modern oceans, temperature gradients strongly influence species distribution. Tropical waters host different communities than polar waters. During the Mesozoic, reduced polar ice and elevated global temperatures likely compressed these gradients. Marine communities may have been more continuous across latitudes. Continuity enhances genetic exchange and dispersal. Dispersal supports resilience and long-term trends towards size increase. Metabolic strategy also influences diving capability. If marine reptiles had elevated metabolic rates, they may have required frequent resurfacing for oxygen. However, larger lung capacity and oxygen storage in blood and muscle could offset this. Modern marine mammals demonstrate how large body size supports extended dives. While marine reptiles were physiologically different, larger size would still allow greater total oxygen storage compared to smaller animals. Access to deeper prey reduces competition in surface waters. Pressure increases with depth, but temperature often decreases. A large predator capable of tolerating cooler temperatures due to thermal inertia gains access to additional niches. In the Mesozoic, deep waters may have been cooler than surface waters, but not as cold as modern abyssal zones due to overall warmer global climate. This may have expanded the habitable depth range for large marine reptiles. Warm climates also reduce the risk of freezing-related mortality in high latitudes. There were no polar ice caps for much of the Mesozoic. Marine reptiles could likely inhabit polar seas year-round. Year-round access to high-latitude productivity zones would enhance resource availability. The marine advantage, therefore, lies in a combination of thermal stability, energy efficiency, and environmental continuity. On land, temperature fluctuations can be extreme. Seasonal droughts, cold winters, and heat waves create unpredictable resource cycles. In warm Mesozoic seas, such extremes were moderated by water's high heat capacity. Water absorbs and releases heat slowly. This buffers against rapid temperature changes. Buffered systems favour long-lived species. Long-lived species have time to grow. Time plus energy equals size. But it is important to recognise limits. Warm periods were punctuated by environmental disruptions. Oceanic anoxic events periodically reduced oxygen levels in large marine areas. Volcanic episodes altered climate and chemistry. During such intervals, large predators may have suffered. Yet over the broad sweep of the Mesozoic, the balance favoured stability more often than collapse. The repeated emergence of large marine reptiles across different periods suggests that temperature and metabolism interacted consistently to support gigantism. Imagine a large Ichthyosaur cruising through warm Jurassic waters. Its muscles contract rhythmically. Blood circulates efficiently. Its internal temperature remains steady within a narrow range. It does not need to bask in sunlight on shore to raise its body temperature. The surrounding water is already within functional range. It hunts, feeds, digests, and continues moving. That continuity of function is critical. When temperature ceases to be a limiting factor, and when energy supply remains robust, natural selection can push size upward without encountering immediate physiological ceilings. Temperature, metabolism, and the marine environment aligned in the Mesozoic to create a rare window in Earth's history. A window where large predators could maintain high activity levels, access broad geographic ranges, and sustain growth over long lifespans. And within that window, competition among these predators intensified, sharpening their abilities and reinforcing the evolutionary pressures that drove the ocean's largest hunters to remarkable extremes. In an ocean filled with abundance, competition does not disappear, it sharpens. When prey is plentiful, more predators can survive. When more predators survive, they encounter each other more often. When they encounter each other more often, the pressure to outperform rivals intensifies. The Mesozoic ocean was not a calm, balanced system drifting along without friction. It was crowded at the top. Ichthyosaurs, Plesiosaurs, pliosaurs, mosasaurs, large sharks, and countless mid-level predators overlapped in time and space. They shared prey, they shared territory, they shared risk. And where overlap exists, escalation follows. An evolutionary arms race begins when two or more lineages exert reciprocal selective pressure on each other. Predator and prey, predator and predator, even members of the same species competing for mates or feeding grounds. In open water, where there are few physical barriers to separate populations, these pressures spread widely and quickly. Consider the relationship between large pliosaurs and their prey. As pliosaurs developed larger skulls and stronger jaws, capable of crushing thick shells or gripping large marine reptiles, prey species faced increased mortality. Those prey individuals with slightly thicker shells, better speed, or more coordinated schooling behaviour had improved survival odds. Over time, average shell thickness might increase, swimming efficiency in fish might improve, reaction times might shorten, predators respond in turn. If prey grow thicker shells, predators with stronger bite forces gain advantage. If prey become faster, predators with better streamlining and muscle power succeed. This cycle does not necessarily produce infinite growth, but it does push traits toward extremes within the limits of physics and physiology. Now consider predator versus predator competition. In regions like the western interior seaway during the late Cretaceous, multiple large mosasaur species coexisted. Plesiosaurs were still present in some areas. Large sharks swam the same waters. When two predators target similar prey, direct competition occurs. There are several ways to resolve such competition. One is specialization. If one species focuses on fish while another crushes ammonites, they reduce overlap. Another is size differentiation. If one lineage increases in size enough to target larger prey or dominate feeding sites, it gains advantage. Gigantism can therefore be both a predator-prey response and a predator-predator response. If being larger allows you to displace competitors physically or intimidate them, natural selection may favour increased size. Fossil evidence of bite marks on bones of marine reptiles suggests that interactions were not always passive. Some pliosaurs show injuries consistent with combat. Mosasaurs bear tooth marks from other mosasaurs. Intraspecific competition likely included violent encounters. In such contests, larger individuals often prevail. Larger size may grant access to better hunting territories, higher quality mates, or more frequent reproductive opportunities. The arms race also extends to sensory systems. If prey evolve better detection of approaching predators, predators must reduce detectability or improve speed. If sharks and marine reptiles compete for similar prey, improvements in sensory acuity or hunting strategy can determine success. Open water intensifies this dynamic because signals travel efficiently. Pressure waves, chemical cues and movement are detectable over distance. There are few obstacles to dampen signals. Prey species must balance the need to feed with constant vigilance. Predators must balance stealth with speed. Now consider depth. If multiple predator species operate in surface waters, one lineage may shift to deeper zones to exploit underused prey. Deep diving requires physiological adaptations, including oxygen storage and pressure tolerance. Species that acquire these traits can access new food sources, reducing competition at the surface. This vertical partitioning reduces direct conflict but increases specialization. Specialization can push morphology to extremes. Large eyes in certain ichthyosaurs suggest adaptation to dim light. Stronger skeletal reinforcement may support deeper dives. As one lineage exploits depth, another may dominate shallow reefs or coastal margins. The arms race is not always about direct confrontation. It is also about strategic repositioning. Even within a single lineage, competition can drive size increase. If individuals that grow larger gain mating advantages or territorial dominance, average size in the population can increase over generations. Sexual selection may amplify traits beyond pure ecological necessity. While direct evidence of sexual dimorphism in many marine reptiles is limited, it is reasonable to infer that size influenced reproductive success. In modern marine predators, larger individuals often have higher reproductive output or greater mating success. The Mesozoic arms race was also influenced by environmental stability. Because warm climates and high sea levels persisted for extended intervals, lineages had time to escalate gradually. Rapid environmental fluctuations can interrupt arms races by causing widespread extinctions before trends solidify. During relatively stable periods of the Jurassic and Cretaceous, competition could build momentum over millions of years. This long-term escalation likely contributed to the extraordinary skull sizes seen in pliosaurs and the immense body lengths of some Ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs. The presence of multiple apex predators in the same system indicates that the food web could sustain high energy throughput. High energy throughput intensifies competition. When resources are abundant but contested, selection favours efficiency. Efficiency can mean faster swimming, stronger bite force, improved manoeuvrability, or greater stamina. In open water, manoeuvrability is critical during pursuit. Foreflipper propulsion in plesiosaurs may have offered precise control compared to tail-driven swimmers in certain contexts. Tail-driven swimmers, however, may have achieved higher top speeds. Different locomotor strategies competed within overlapping prey spaces. Each innovation altered the competitive landscape. If mosasaurs developed flexible skulls that allowed them to swallow large prey whole, this may have pressured pliosaurs to refine crushing ability or shift prey preference. If sharks diversified and became more capable flesh slicers, marine reptiles may have faced increased scavenging competition. Competition also extends to juveniles. Nursery areas in shallow seas may have been crowded with young marine reptiles, fish and sharks. Juvenile mortality shapes adult population structure. Species that protect young through live birth or selection of safer habitats may gain advantage. The arms race therefore operates at multiple life stages. There is no single moment when escalation stops. Instead, systems reach temporary equilibria. A large pliosaur dominates until prey defenses improve or environmental change shifts balance. Mosasaurs rise when earlier lineages decline. The late Cretaceous represents one of the peak moments of this arms race. Multiple large predator lineages overlapped. Sharks diversified. Prey species were abundant and varied. Imagine an inland sea crowded with life. A mosasaur lunges at a fish school. A large shark trails at distance, waiting for opportunity. A plesiosaur patrols near the surface. Juvenile marine reptiles dart through shallows. Every movement is watched. Every advantage matters. In such an environment, even marginal improvements in speed, strength, or detection can determine survival and reproductive success. Over millions of years, those marginal improvements accumulate. Skulls grow larger, bodies lengthen, teeth sharpen, muscles strengthen. The ocean rewards performance. But arms races are energy intensive. They depend on stable, abundant systems. When the end Cretaceous asteroid impact disrupted plankton productivity, the base of the food web collapsed rapidly. With it, the entire competitive structure above began to fail. The arms race ended not because one lineage won definitively, but because the arena itself changed. During its height, however, competition below the surface drove marine predators to extraordinary limits. Gigantism was not merely permitted by physics and climate, it was reinforced by rivalry. Each predator shaped the evolution of others, each adaptation triggered response. In that sustained escalation, the Mesozoic ocean became a proving ground for extremes, and from that proving ground emerged the largest marine predators the world had yet seen, standing at the top of a dynamic, contested hierarchy that lasted until the system itself was abruptly reset. For nearly 186 million years, marine reptiles dominated the oceans. They survived climate swings, they endured volcanic eruptions, they adapted to shifting continents and changing sea levels, they competed with sharks and with one another, they grew larger, stronger, more specialised, and then, in geological terms, it ended almost instantly. 66 million years ago, at the boundary between the Cretaceous and the Paleogene, an asteroid roughly 10 kilometres wide struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact released energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs. Rock vaporised, shockwaves circled the planet, debris was thrown high into the atmosphere and beyond. This event did not only affect land. Within hours, tsunamis swept across shallow seas. Within days, fine particles and vaporized material began to block sunlight. Within weeks to months, global temperatures dropped as dust and aerosols reduced incoming solar radiation. The oceans felt the consequences immediately. Phytoplankton, the base of marine food webs, depend on sunlight. Without sufficient light, photosynthesis collapses. When primary productivity falls sharply, the entire trophic structure above it begins to fail. Ammonites disappeared entirely at this boundary. Belemnites vanished as well. Many species of plankton suffered catastrophic losses. The giants at the top of the food web were dependent on this base. A 15-metre mosasaur requires a constant flow of energy upward from plankton to fish to cephalopods to itself. Interrupt that flow, and starvation begins quickly. Unlike small, opportunistic species that can switch diets or survive on minimal intake, large predators require substantial, consistent energy. Evidence from fossil records indicates that mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and remaining marine reptiles disappeared at or very near the end Cretaceous boundary. They did not gradually decline over millions of years after the impact. They were already under some ecological pressures from sea level changes and regional shifts, but the asteroid impact appears to have been the decisive blow. Gigantism, which had been an advantage in stable, productive systems, became a liability. Large body size correlates with slower reproductive rates in many species. Fewer offspring, longer gestation or development periods, and delayed sexual maturity reduce the capacity to rebound quickly after population crashes. If prey populations collapse and remain low for years, large predators cannot recover easily. The end Cretaceous event likely triggered years of reduced productivity. Soot from global wildfires and dust from impact ejecta may have blocked sunlight for months. Acid rain altered ocean chemistry. Temperature fluctuations stressed marine organisms. Plankton populations were severely disrupted. In some regions, entire plankton communities were replaced by opportunistic species. Without abundant ammonites, belemnites, and diverse fish populations, marine reptiles faced an energy deficit they could not overcome. Fossil evidence shows a sharp boundary. Below it, mosasaurs and plesiosaurs are common. Above it, they are gone. Sharks, however, persisted. Not all shark lineages survived, but enough did to continue into the Paleogene. Why? Several factors likely contributed. First, many sharks were smaller than the largest marine reptiles. Smaller body size often correlates with faster reproduction and greater ecological flexibility. Second, sharks occupy a wide range of trophic levels. Some species feed on invertebrates or small fish, rather than relying exclusively on large prey. Third, shark embryos and reproductive strategies may have allowed more rapid recovery after initial population declines. Marine reptiles, particularly the largest forms, were highly specialized apex predators. Specialization increases vulnerability when conditions change rapidly. The collapse of ammonites and belemnites removed major prey sources. Even if some fish species survived, overall biomass likely fell sharply. Imagine the late Cretaceous inland sea days after the impact. The surface darkens as sunlight dims, phytoplankton growth slows, zooplankton populations begin to decline, fish feed less, cephalopods starve. A large mosasaur adapted for active predation continues to hunt. It may succeed initially, but prey becomes scarcer. Injured individuals recover more slowly. Juveniles face higher mortality. Within a short span of years, population numbers drop. Reproduction slows or ceases as energy reserves decline. Apex predators cannot simply switch to eating microscopic organisms. Their bodies are built for capturing large prey. When that prey vanishes, so do they. Mass extinctions reset ecological systems. The end Cretaceous event was not the first mass extinction of the Mesozoic, but it was the final one for non-avian dinosaurs and marine reptiles. Earlier extinctions had allowed marine reptiles to diversify by clearing ecological space. This time, the clearing was too complete. Entire clades vanished. It is important to note that the extinction was not uniform across all marine life. Bony fish survived. Many shark lineages survived. Some invertebrates persisted and diversified in the aftermath. But the era of reptilian giants in the sea ended abruptly. The fall of the sea titans illustrates the fragility of gigantism. Large predators sit atop long chains of energy transfer, disrupt enough links in that chain, and the apex collapses first. For nearly 200 million years, the Mesozoic ocean supported some of the largest and most formidable predators Earth had ever seen. Physics allowed their size, climate supported their metabolism, geography provided space, food webs supplied energy, competition sharpened their abilities, but when the base of that structure fractured, the entire hierarchy followed. After the extinction, oceans did not remain empty of large predators forever. Over tens of millions of years, new lineages would rise. Marine mammals would return to the sea from terrestrial ancestors. Sharks would eventually produce species of enormous size, including Megalodon. But the specific configuration that allowed Ichthyosaurs, pliosaurs, Plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs to dominate never returned in the same way. Continents continued to drift. Global climates cooled over the Cenozoic. Polar ice caps formed. Sea levels fluctuated differently. Marine ecosystems reorganized around new dominant groups. The fall of the sea titans was not simply the disappearance of large reptiles. It marked the end of a unique planetary state. A warm, high sea level, plankton-rich, reptile-dominated ocean gave way to a cooler, reorganized world. Mass extinction is often framed as destruction alone, but it is also transition. The niches once occupied by marine reptiles did not remain empty indefinitely. They were gradually filled by new evolutionary experiments. Yet the scale and diversity of Mesozoic marine reptiles remain unmatched in certain respects. Their extinction reminds us that even the most powerful apex predators depend entirely on conditions beneath them. When sunlight fails, when plankton die, when food webs fracture, even giants fall. And in the quiet aftermath, as sediment settled and oceans slowly cleared, evolution began again, building new hierarchies in seas that no longer belonged to reptiles. When the dust settled after the end Cretaceous extinction, the oceans did not remain empty. Life returned quickly in evolutionary terms. Plankton communities reorganized, fish diversified, sharks continued their long, adaptable lineage. Marine mammals would eventually descend from land and claim their own dominance in the seas. And yet, when we compare what came after to what existed during the height of the Mesozoic, something stands out. Nothing since has quite replicated that particular combination of scale, diversity and duration among marine predators. There have been giants. The blue whale surpasses any marine reptile in total mass. Megalodon, millions of years after the reptiles vanished, reached extraordinary size among sharks. Sperm whales dive to immense depths and hunt large squid. But the structure of the system that produced the Mesozoic sea titans has not returned in the same form. Start with climate. For much of the Mesozoic, global temperatures were elevated, and there were no permanent polar ice caps. Sea levels were high for extended intervals. Shallow seas flooded continental interiors. Warm water extended across wide latitudes. After the extinction, Earth did not remain in that state indefinitely. Although the early Paleogene was warm, long-term trends through the Cenozoic led toward cooling. By the Oligocene and Miocene, Antarctic glaciation had begun. Eventually, polar ice caps became permanent features. Global temperature gradients increased. Cooler oceans alter productivity patterns and circulation. Modern oceans are structured differently. Cold, nutrient-rich upwellings drive high productivity in certain regions, but large expanses of the open ocean are relatively nutrient-poor compared to shallow Mesozoic epicontinental seas. High sea levels during the Mesozoic created broad continental shelves where sunlight penetrated shallow waters across enormous areas. Today, continental shelves exist, but their extent and distribution differ due to lower global sea levels and different continental configurations. Geography changed permanently. During the Mesozoic, the breakup of Pangea created extensive warm inland seas. These shallow basins were biological engines. In the modern world, there are no equivalents on that scale. Continents are arranged differently. Inland seas exist, but they are smaller and often more restricted. This matters for energy flow. Shallow seas concentrate nutrients and support dense food webs. Large predators thrive where prey is abundant and consistently available. Modern oceans still support rich ecosystems, but productivity is patchier. Vast areas of the open ocean are oligotrophic, meaning nutrient-poor. Large marine mammals like blue whales exploit seasonal productivity blooms, particularly in polar regions. But their gigantism is based on a different strategy: filter feeding. They consume enormous quantities of small prey, such as krill, rather than pursuing large animals. This represents a structural shift in how gigantism functions. In the Mesozoic, marine reptile giants were primarily active predators targeting sizable prey. Their size amplified their hunting capability. In the Cenozoic, the largest animals evolved toward bulk filter feeding. Instead of hunting large vertebrates, they processed dense aggregations of small organisms. This difference reflects changes in food web architecture. Post-extinction marine ecosystems reorganized around new dominant groups. Teleost fish diversified extensively. Marine mammals evolved from terrestrial ancestors. Seabirds expanded. Sharks continued adapting. But the specific combination of reptilian physiology, warm global climate, expansive shallow seas, and long-term ecological stability that characterized much of the Mesozoic did not reassemble. Another factor is duration. Marine reptiles dominated for nearly 186 million years. That is an extraordinary span of time for a group of apex predators to persist and diversify in the same general environment. Cenozoic marine mammals have existed for roughly 50 million years. While impressive, this duration is significantly shorter. Longevity in stable conditions allows evolutionary arms races to escalate gradually and persist. The Mesozoic arms race among Ichthyosaurs, Plesiosaurs, pliosaurs, mosasaurs and sharks unfolded across tens of millions of years without a total system reset until the end. In the Cenozoic, environmental changes have been more frequent and pronounced. Cooling trends, glacial cycles, sea level fluctuations and tectonic shifts repeatedly altered marine habitats. While marine mammals achieved significant size and dominance in certain intervals, the broader environmental variability may have limited prolonged escalation across multiple predator lineages simultaneously. Competition structure changed as well. In the Mesozoic, multiple large reptilian predator lineages coexisted for extended periods. Ichthyosaurs overlapped with plesiosaurs. Pliosaurs overlapped with early mosasaurs. Sharks operated alongside all of them. In the Cenozoic, while large sharks and marine mammals coexist, the diversity of large apex lineages has generally been lower at any given time. Megalodon, for example, dominated certain Miocene and Pliocene seas, but it did not share those waters with multiple distinct lineages of equally massive marine reptiles. The web at the top is narrower. Modern ecosystems often exhibit strong apex control by fewer species per region. Human influence in recent geological time adds another difference. Over the past few million years, and especially in the last several thousand years, human activity has altered marine ecosystems dramatically. Industrial fishing, pollution, and climate change have reduced populations of large marine predators. Even before industrialization, early human expansion may have influenced coastal ecosystems. The Mesozoic oceans, by contrast, were free of such external pressures. Predator-prey dynamics operated without interference from a technologically dominant species. This allowed natural arms races to proceed uninterrupted. There is also the matter of extinction itself. The end Cretaceous event was so comprehensive that it cleared nearly all large marine reptiles simultaneously. Such a complete reset is rare. When marine mammals later evolved and diversified, they entered ecosystems structured around different baseline conditions. They inherited a cooler world with polar ice, altered circulation patterns, and different prey communities. The evolutionary pathways available to them differed from those available to early marine reptiles in warm, high sea level Mesozoic oceans. Consider body architecture. Marine reptiles had different skeletal constraints compared to mammals. Ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs, for example, did not require the same lung structures and reproductive strategies as mammals. Marine mammals must surface to breathe air. While marine reptiles also breathed air, differences in metabolic strategies and thermoregulation may have influenced diving patterns and energy budgets differently. Mammalian endothermy demands constant high metabolic input. This supports sustained activity, but also requires high, reliable energy intake. In modern oceans, this energy is often concentrated seasonally or regionally rather than spread evenly across vast shallow seas year-round. Filter-feeding baleen whales exploit seasonal abundance effectively, but large predatory marine mammals, such as orcas or sperm whales, do not reach the same mass as blue whales and are fewer in number compared to the reptilian giants of the late Cretaceous. Sharks, after the extinction, continued evolving. Megalodon reached lengths estimated around 15 to possibly 20 meters, rivaling large mosasaurs in length and exceeding many in mass. But Megalodon existed within a different ecological structure. It did not share its world with multiple lineages of equally massive marine reptiles. Its rise and fall occurred within a cooler, more dynamically fluctuating Cenozoic ocean. When Megalodon went extinct around 3.6 million years ago, likely due to cooling climates and changes in prey distribution, no direct replacement of similar size emerged among sharks. Large apex predatory sharks exist today, but none approach that scale. The absence of repeated sustained marine reptile-style gigantism suggests that the precise alignment of factors during the Mesozoic was unusual. Warm global climate, high sea levels, expansive shallow seas, stable, productive food webs, long uninterrupted time spans for escalation. These ingredients combined once in that particular way. Imagine standing above a late Cretaceous inland sea once more. Multiple massive predators share the water, ammonites drift below, fish schools flash in dense formations. The climate is warm across latitudes, sea level is high. Now imagine a modern ocean. It is still vast and alive. Whales migrate through it, sharks patrol, tuna move in coordinated groups, but polar ice caps anchor the extremes. Deep, nutrient-poor gyres occupy broad regions. Human vessels cross its surface daily. The ocean remains powerful, but its structure is different. Nothing since has quite recreated the specific stage upon which the Mesozoic sea titans evolved. There have been giants, yes, but the combination of multiple massive reptilian apex predators coexisting across expansive warm seas for nearly 200 million years under conditions of long-term climatic stability has not been repeated. That era was a convergence, a particular arrangement of physics, chemistry, geography and time. And once it ended, the world reorganized along new lines, the oceans continued, life adapted, new predators rose. But the age when reptiles ruled the sea at extraordinary scale belongs to a specific chapter in Earth's history, one defined by circumstances that so far have not aligned again in quite the same way. If you stand on a modern shoreline and look out over the horizon, it is easy to believe that the age of marine giants is over. The reptiles are gone. The inland seas have drained. The continents sit in their present positions. Polar ice caps anchor the ends of the planet. And yet, when a blue whale surfaces beside a research vessel, exhaling a vertical plume into cold air, it becomes clear that gigantism did not vanish entirely with the Mesozoic. It changed form. The blue whale, Balaenoptera musculus, is the largest animal known to have ever lived. In total mass, it exceeds even the largest marine reptiles and the largest dinosaurs. Some individuals surpass 150 metric tons. That figure alone forces comparison. But the path to that size is different. Mesozoic marine reptiles were active predators targeting sizable prey. Blue whales are filter feeders. They consume vast quantities of small crustaceans, primarily krill, by engulfing enormous volumes of water and straining it through baleen plates. This strategy represents a structural shift in how ocean ecosystems support gigantism. In the Mesozoic, food webs were layered with large mid-level prey such as ammonites, belemnites, and sizable fish. Apex predators grew large to overpower large prey. In the Cenozoic, particularly after the development of polar ice caps and intensified ocean circulation, certain regions of the ocean became highly seasonal but extremely productive. Cold, nutrient-rich upwellings stimulate plankton blooms. These blooms support dense swarms of krill. Krill swarms can reach astonishing densities. Instead of chasing individual large prey, blue whales move through these swarms with open mouths, capturing thousands of small organisms in a single lunge. This is gigantism powered by concentration rather than by predatory escalation. Yet there are echoes. Buoyancy still supports mass. Water still reduces the mechanical cost of supporting a body weighing over 100 tons. A blue whale on land would collapse under its own weight. In the ocean, it glides with minimal strain. Thermal inertia still plays a role. Large body size allows whales to maintain stable internal temperatures even in cold waters. Thick blubber insulates them. Their metabolic systems sustain constant warmth. In this sense, they parallel certain Mesozoic marine reptiles that may have maintained elevated body temperatures relative to surrounding water. But there is a key difference in environmental context. The blue whale's size depends on highly productive cold water systems driven by modern ocean circulation patterns. These systems did not exist in the same way during the Mesozoic. Polar glaciation strengthens temperature gradients between equator and poles. Stronger gradients intensify ocean currents. These currents drive upwelling of nutrients in certain regions, fueling massive plankton blooms. Of productivity differed. Shallow inland of productivity differed. Shallow inland seas and broad continental shelves supported diverse food webs with substantial mid-level prey. Modern whales exploit small prey at extraordinary density rather than large prey across broad shallow seas. This distinction reflects how marine ecosystems reorganized after the extinction of marine reptiles. Sperm whales provide another echo. They are large predators, diving to great depths to hunt squid. They possess significant oxygen storage capacity in blood and muscle, allowing extended dives. In this respect, they resemble certain deep-diving ichthyosaurs in function, though not in ancestry. The ocean continues to reward size when it aligns with energy flow. But the architecture of the food web has shifted. In the Mesozoic, ammonites and belemnites served as crucial intermediaries between plankton and apex reptiles. After their extinction, other groups filled similar roles, but the balance changed. Modern large sharks, such as the great white, are formidable predators. They hunt seals, fish, and other marine animals, but their maximum size does not rival the largest mosasaurs or pliosaurs in mass. Megalodon once approached that scale, but it existed in a different climate regime and ultimately disappeared as ocean temperatures cooled and prey distribution shifted. Blue whales achieved their size relatively recently in geological terms, within the past few million years. Their gigantism is tied to the strengthening of polar productivity and the expansion of krill populations. When climate fluctuates, whale populations respond quickly. This highlights another difference. Mesozoic marine reptiles persisted across tens of millions of years in relatively warm, stable climates. Modern marine giants operate within more dynamic systems influenced by glacial cycles and, increasingly, human activity. Human impact introduces a factor absent from Mesozoic oceans. Industrial whaling in the 20th century dramatically reduced blue whale populations. Fishing pressure alters prey distribution. Climate change modifies ocean temperatures and circulation. The modern ocean is not free of external interference, yet the underlying principles remain. Water reduces gravitational constraints. High productivity supports large bodies. Energy concentration, whether in krill swarms or fish schools, enables mass accumulation. There are also anatomical echoes. The streamlined bodies of whales resemble those of ichthyosaurs in overall hydrodynamic profile. Tail flukes in whales generate thrust much like the crescent flukes of certain marine reptiles. Convergent evolution appears again. When vertebrates return to the sea, they often converge on similar solutions. This reinforces the idea that physics shapes life consistently across eras, but the scale of diversity among giant predators in the Mesozoic has not been fully replicated. Today, one lineage dominates marine gigantism in terms of mass: baleen whales. Predatory giants exist, but fewer lineages share that role simultaneously. In the late Cretaceous, multiple marine reptile groups coexisted at large size within overlapping ecosystems. That layered dominance has not reappeared in the same way. Modern ecosystems are structured differently. Filter feeders dominate the extreme upper end of mass. Active macropredators, while impressive, remain smaller on average than the largest baleen whales. The pattern of gigantism has shifted from predatory escalation to bulk feeding efficiency. Still, when a blue whale passes beneath a small boat, the visual impact echoes something ancient. A massive body suspended effortlessly in water. Movement powered by enormous musculature. Migration across entire ocean basins. These traits connect modern giants to ancient ones. Imagine the open ocean today. Cold water rises from depth near polar regions. Phytoplankton bloom in spring and summer sunlight. Krill populations surge. Blue whales migrate thousands of kilometers to feed. Now imagine a late Jurassic Sea. Warm water stretches across shallow continental shelves. Ammonites drift. Fish school densely. Ichthyosaurs cruise in pursuit. Different prey, different climate, different lineages. But the principle remains. When oceans produce abundant energy, and when bodies can harness that energy efficiently, size expands. The echo is not perfect, but it is clear. Gigantism in the sea is not an anomaly. It is a recurring possibility, activated when environmental and ecological conditions align. The Mesozoic represented one long activation of that possibility in a reptilian form. The modern ocean represents another, shaped by mammals and altered by climate cycles and human influence. The pattern persists, even if the players change, and in both eras, the story of marine giants ultimately rests on the same foundation: the invisible productivity of the ocean itself, rising from sunlight and nutrients, building from the smallest organisms upward toward the largest bodies ever to move through water. When you stretch the timeline of Earth out across hundreds of millions of years, scale begins to lose its familiar meaning. A human lifetime becomes invisible. Recorded history becomes a thin line. Even entire civilizations rise and fall within moments when measured against geological time. The Mesozoic era lasted nearly 186 million years. Within that span, oceans warmed, continents split apart, sea levels rose and fell, and entire predator lineages rose to dominance and disappeared. From that distance, even the largest marine reptiles are temporary. Yet within their time, they were the upper limit of what biology could assemble. A 20-metre Ichthyosaur, a pliosaur with a skull longer than a person is tall, a mosasaur dominating inland seas for millions of years. These animals were not isolated experiments, they were stable outcomes sustained across vast stretches of time. Deep time changes how we think about scale. We tend to measure size in physical units, meters, tons, teeth length, bite force. But scale is also ecological and temporal. A predator that persists for 50 million years across multiple ocean basins represents scale not just in body length, but in influence. For nearly 200 million years, marine reptiles structured ecosystems at the top. They shaped prey evolution. They influenced population dynamics. They controlled energy flow in their regions. That is ecological scale. When we compare them to modern marine giants, we see both continuity and difference. Blue whales exceed them in mass, but their strategy is different. They feed on tiny prey in enormous quantities. They depend on concentrated seasonal productivity. Mesozoic predators fed on mid to large prey in layered food webs that extended across shallow seas. Both represent solutions to the same fundamental constraint: energy. Deep time teaches that gigantism is not a constant. It appears when conditions align. It fades when those conditions shift. The Mesozoic alignment included warm global climate, high sea levels, expansive shallow seas, diverse prey communities, and long-term environmental stability. Those ingredients allowed size to escalate repeatedly across multiple lineages. When the end Cretaceous extinction disrupted that alignment, gigantism in reptilian form ended abruptly. New alignments emerged in the Cenozoic. Polar ice caps formed, ocean circulation intensified, seasonal productivity zones expanded, marine mammals entered the sea and diversified. Gigantism returned in a new format. Scale, then, is contextual. A 15-metre mosasaur was immense in its world. A 30-metre blue whale is immense in ours. But both are constrained by physics and sustained by ecology. Deep time also reframes dominance. It is easy to think of the present as stable and permanent. Yet from a geological perspective, the current marine ecosystem is one phase among many. The Mesozoic ocean seems stable for millions of years. Marine reptiles dominated so thoroughly that it may have appeared inevitable. Then a single impact event, combined with existing volcanic activity and environmental stress, reshaped everything. Dominance is temporary. Scale does not guarantee survival. Gigantism magnifies dependence on stable systems. Large predators require strong food webs. Strong food webs require consistent primary productivity. Primary productivity requires sunlight, nutrients, and appropriate circulation. Remove one of those components and the structure falters. The fall of marine reptiles demonstrates this clearly. Their extinction was not due to gradual decline alone. It was triggered by a sudden collapse in energy flow. Deep time perspective reveals that ecosystems are layered structures. At the base, microscopic phytoplankton converting sunlight into biomass. Above them, zooplankton, small fish, cephalopods. Above them, larger fish, marine reptiles, sharks. At the top, apex predators whose size reflects the strength of everything beneath them. The larger the apex, the broader and more stable the base must be. This pattern repeats across eras. It also suggests limits. There are physical ceilings to size in water, just as there are on land. Oxygen diffusion, heat retention, structural integrity and energy acquisition impose boundaries. The fact that blue whales represent the largest known animals in history may indicate that modern oceans, under current conditions, support near maximum possible body size for vertebrates. The fact that Mesozoic reptiles repeatedly reached lengths exceeding 15 meters suggests that their oceans approach similar ecological ceilings in their own way. Deep time encourages comparison not in isolation, but in sequence. The Carboniferous had giant insects when atmospheric oxygen was higher. The Mesozoic had giant marine reptiles under warm, expansive seas. The Cenozoic has giant filter-feeding whales in nutrient-rich polar waters. Each era's giants reflect its environmental structure. When you consider this, the question shifts. It is no longer simply, why did the Mesozoic ocean create the largest predators in history? It becomes, under what conditions does the planet allow extreme size to emerge? The answer is consistent. When energy is abundant, when physical constraints are minimized, when environmental stability persists long enough for escalation to accumulate. Deep time also reminds us that present-day systems are not immune to change. Climate shifts are already altering ocean temperatures and circulation patterns. Polar ice is diminishing. Productivity zones may shift. Modern marine giants depend on these patterns. If circulation weakens or prey distribution change significantly, even the largest animals alive today could face pressures similar to those that ended the Mesozoic sea titans. The story of giant predators is not only about awe, it is about dependence. Dependence on microscopic life, dependence on climate balance, dependence on geological configuration. When we zoom out far enough, the largest predator becomes a visible indicator of invisible processes. A pliosaur skull 2 meters long is a fossilized measurement of Jurassic productivity. A blue whale surfacing in polar waters is a living measurement of modern nutrient flow. Scale becomes diagnostic. It tells us how much energy moves through the system. It tells us how stable that movement is, and deep time reveals that such conditions are rare and temporary. The Mesozoic ocean was one of those rare alignments. For millions of years, physics, climate, geography and ecology synchronized in a way that permitted reptiles to reach extraordinary dimensions. They were not anomalies. They were products of alignment. When alignment shifted, they vanished. Modern giants stand as echoes of that pattern. Different lineage, different prey, different climate, same underlying principle. Energy builds size, time refines it, instability erases it. In the end, the largest predators in history teach us less about aggression and more about structure. They are monuments to systems that worked at enormous scale. And as we look across oceans today, watching whales breach and sharks glide beneath the surface, we are seeing the current expression of a pattern that has repeated across deep time. Not identical, not permanent, but governed by the same rules that once shaped the Mesozoic seas into a world capable of building giants.